So hey, what's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So in this video we are going to see what if Harry was reincarnated as a Merlin. So this will be a movie, and if you want more movies like this, then please leave a like, share and subscribe. And don't worry, I will be not hosting the whole video, so you don't have to watch me all over the video. So let's jump right into the video.
The first time Harry realized his scar could listen, it was because the cupboard door wouldn't open. Not because Uncle Vernon had nailed it shut again. Vernon had always been fond of nails. As if metal could hold down a child the way it held down a plank, but because the air itself had thickened. Like the hallway had turned into syrup. Like the house was, deciding. Harry pressed his palm against the cupboard door and felt it. A line. Invisible, cold, and sharp as a winter blade. It ran through the wood, through the frame, through the wall, straight into the bones of Privet Drive. He pulled his hand back as if he'd touched a live wire. The scar on his forehead stung, not with the familiar prick of old pain, but with something that felt like recognition. A whisper, not in his ears but behind his eyes. Late. Harry swallowed. For a second he thought he'd imagined it. Hunger and fear did odd things. Being 11 did odd things. But then the sting, ing in his scar shifted, turned from pain into pressure, as if someone had placed a fingertip against his forehead from the inside and pushed. He rubbed it hard. The pressure didn't go away. Outside, the television blared. Dudley's laughter shook the walls. Aunt Petunia's heels clicked like impatient metronomes. The house smelled like frying oil and old carpet and the kind of cleanliness that was more about control than comfort. Harry exhaled slowly. He had learned to survive by being small. Quiet. Unseen. But whatever this was, whatever had just touched the world through him, didn't feel small. It felt like a door had cracked open in the dark. And something ancient had inhaled. He was still staring at the cupboard door when Uncle Vernon's footsteps approached like an oncoming storm. Heavy. Certain. The sound of a man who believed the ground owed him obedience. The door jerked open. Light stabbed into the cramped space. Vernon Dursley filled the doorway with his bulk and his anger, face already purple. "What are you doing in there, boy?" he snarled, even though the answer was obvious. Harry blinked against the light. "Sleeping," he said automatically. Vernon's eyes narrowed, as if the word itself offended him. "Don't get clever, Petunia," he shouted over his shoulder. "He's up. Again." Harry expected the usual. A shove, a barked order, maybe a smack if Vernon was in the mood to prove something to himself. Instead, Vernon leaned in. And stopped. His face twitched, like he'd forgotten the next line of his own script. Harry felt it again, that line in the air. Not wood or nails or human anger. Something older and colder. It had wrapped itself between them, invisible as breath. Vernon's expression shifted from irritation to confusion to sudden, sharp discomfort. He blinked hard, as if smoke had gotten into his eyes. "What?" he began, then flinched back as though a hand had snapped in front of his nose. Harry's stomach tightened. He hadn't moved. He hadn't done anything. But Vernon backed away anyway, rubbing his forearm. "What is wrong with this blasted house?" he muttered, voice rougher than usual. He glared at Harry, but it wasn't the normal hatred, this was, wary. Like a dog staring at a closed gate it didn't trust. Aunt Petunia appeared behind him, hands still damp from washing dishes. "What are you shouting about?" Vernon's gaze flicked to her. "There's something," he started. Then stopped again, jaw working. Harry felt the pressure in his scar pulse. "Do not cross." The words didn't sound like English. They didn't sound like anything. They weren't even heard. They were known. Like the memory of a rule you'd always followed without remembering who taught it to you. Vernon's face twisted. "Nothing," he snapped, too fast. "Nothing. Get him out. He's making that look again." Harry didn't know what look Vernon meant. He didn't feel different. But the air between them remained tense, a stretched thread humming with quiet authority. Petunia's eyes slid to Harry's forehead, to his scar, as if she could see the pressure there. Her mouth tightened. "Breakfast," she said sharply. "And don't touch anything." Harry crawled out, shoulders hunched. He expected Vernon's hand to grab his collar, to jerk him forward. But Vernon stepped aside, just slightly. Enough to let Harry pass without contact. Enough that Harry noticed. Enough that fear and wonder twisted together in his chest like a knot. The kitchen was too bright. Sunlight spilled across the counters. The radio droned. Dudley sat at the table shoveling cereal into his mouth as if someone might steal it from him. Harry moved like a shadow to his usual place, standing near the sink, because chairs were for people. Petunia slammed a piece of toast onto a plate and slid it across the counter without looking at him. It stopped an inch short of his fingers. Harry reached for it. The moment his fingertips brushed the crust, the pressure in his scar flared, hot, bright, and the air shivered. A thin line of frost, actual frost, spidered across the counter from under the plate, delicate and impossible in the warm kitchen. Dudley paused mid-chew. Petunia went very still. Vernon's chair scraped back so hard it screeched. Harry froze with the toast in his hand, staring at the frost as it glittered in the sunlight like a lie made real. His breath caught. I didn't. Boy, Vernon roared, but the sound faltered halfway through, as if his own voice had hit a wall. Because the kitchen had changed. It wasn't dramatic, no thunder, no flying dishes. It was worse. The space around Harry felt claimed. Like an invisible circle had drawn itself with him at the center. Like the air had decided he belonged to it, and anyone who wanted tea over him would have to argue with the rules of the world first. Vernon's face contorted. He tried to step forward, and stopped again, body jerking like he'd walked into an unseen fence. He lifted a hand, then flinched back, shaking it as though burned. Petunia's eyes were wide, not surprised, never surprised, not really, but terrified in a way Harry had never seen. Not here, she whispered, voice thin. Not here. Harry's head throbbed. The pressure behind his eyes pulsed in time with his heartbeat, and with it came something else, images that weren't images. Sensations. A cold stone floor beneath bare feet. The smell of wax and iron and rain. The sound of chanting far away. And underneath it all, a calm thought, steady as a law written into the bones of the earth. A home is a boundary. A boundary must be honored. Harry swallowed hard, because the thought didn't feel like his. It felt older. It felt like someone else had been thinking it for centuries and had only just remembered. He still had a mouth to speak through. He looked down at the counter again, at the frost line curling into a shape. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. 3 strokes. A curve. A hook. A symbol. Harry stared at it, trembling. He didn't know what it meant. But his skin did. His bones did. His scar did. And for the first time in his life, Harry Potter felt something that wasn't fear. He felt the world answering him. Vernon, red-faced, grabbed the nearest thing he could, his newspaper, and hurled it across the kitchen like a weapon. It hit the invisible boundary. And stopped. Mid-air. Not floating gently. Not magically suspended like in a storybook. Stopped the way a rock stops when it slams into glass. The paper crumpled as if crushed by an unseen fist, then dropped to the floor with a soft, humiliating thump. Silence fell. Dudley's spoon clinked against his bowl as his hand shook. Petunia's lips parted, but no sound came out. Vernon stared at the fallen paper as if it had betrayed him. Then slowly lifted his eyes to Harry. Something shifted in Vernon's expression, something ugly. Not just anger. Fear. The kind of fear that makes people crueler, because ULT is the only language they know to feel powerful again. You, Vernon rasped. You freakish. The pressure in Harry's scar spiked, and for a second the kitchen went cold enough that his breath fogged. Harry didn't mean to. He didn't want to. But the air around him tightened like a fist, and Vernon's words died in his throat. Then another whisper rose behind Harry's eyes, softer than the first. Like a teacher leaning down beside a student's desk. Words shape worlds. Choose yours. Harry's mouth went dry. He looked at Vernon, at Petunia, at Dudley, at the frost line that had become a rune without permission. And he realized something that made his stomach twist. Whatever this was, it wasn't random accidental magic. It was structured. It was law. And it was waking up. That night, Harry lay on his thin mattress in the cupboard, staring at the underside of the stairs. He should have been relieved. For the first time, Vernon hadn't hit him. For the first time, Petunia had backed away without spitting insults like poison. But relief didn't come. Because the moment the house felt quiet, the whisper returned. Not once. Not twice. A steady murmur at the edge of sleep. Images flickered behind his eyes. A vast lake under moonlight. A hand reaching through water. Steel catching starlight. A table. Not the Dursleys' table. Around one, carved with symbols that hummed like living things. And a voice, older than the house, older than the street, older than England, speaking with calm disappointment. "You were late, Emrys." Harry sat bolt upright, heart hammering. He didn't know the name. But the instant it was spoken, his scar burned like a brand. And in the darkness, for the first time, Harry answered without thinking. "What am I late for?" The cupboard air turned icy. Something in the world beyond Privet Drive, something sealed, sleeping, and patient, stirred. And somewhere, impossibly far away, something answered. "For coming home." The letter arrived the next morning like a threat wrapped in politeness. Harry heard it before he saw it, the tap of something striking the doormat, the soft scrape of paper against bristles, the steady hum in his scar like a kettle about to boil. He waited until the footsteps upstairs turned into the heavy rhythm of Vernon pacing the bedroom. Dudley's snoring rattled the walls. Petunia's muttering drifted down the stairs, sharp and restless. Harry eased the cupboard door open. The hallway was empty. On the mat sat a single envelope, thick cream paper with green ink. Mr. H. Potter. The cupboard under the stairs. 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Harry stared at it, chest tightening. No one had ever written to him. Not once. His fingers hovered, and the pressure behind his eyes swelled, like the letter itself was radiating meaning. When he touched the envelope, his scar flared, not painfully this time, but like warmth spreading through cold hands. And suddenly, the writing changed. Not the normal ink. Under it, a second script, faint at first, then clearer as if the paper had been waiting for the right person to look at it. Harry's breath caught. The hidden ink wasn't English. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't even letters, not really, more like shapes that made his skin itch with recognition. Threshold acknowledged. Air pattern detected. Legacy stirring. Harry blinked hard, and the words stayed. He didn't understand why, but he knew instinctively, this wasn't meant for Vernon. Or Petunia. Or any ordinary person. It was meant for him. And that made it worse. Because it meant someone out there didn't just know he existed. They knew something inside him had woken up. Vernon found the letter 5 minutes later. Harry was at the sink pretending he hadn't moved, heart still galloping. When Vernon stomped down the stairs in his dressing gown like an angry walrus. He froze the moment he saw the envelope in Petunia's hands. Petunia looked pale, paler than usual. Our fingers gripped the paper as if it might bite her. "Vernon," she whispered. "It's started." "What started?" Vernon barked, then snatched the envelope and read the address. His face twisted as if he'd tasted something sour. "No," Vernon said. "No, no, no. We are not doing this." Harry didn't speak. He didn't need to. The letter did it for him just by existing. Vernon ripped it in half. He paper tore easily, too easily, like it wanted to be torn. Vernon tossed the pieces into the bin with the satisfaction of a man who believed problems could be solved by violence. Harry felt the pressure in his scar pulse once. Calm and cold. A minute later, another letter arrived. Then another. Then another. By lunchtime, there were 6 envelopes on the mat. By evening, there were dozens. The mail slot coughed them out like a machine gone mad. They slid under doors, dropped down the chimney, fell from nowhere when no windows were open. Petunia stood rigid in the kitchen, lips moving silently as if she were praying to a god she didn't believe in. Dudley started to cry. Vernon started to panic. "We're leaving," Vernon announced, voice shaking with forced authority. "We're going somewhere they can't find us." Petunia's eyes flicked to Harry, sharp, terrified, guilty. Harry stared back, because he'd never seen her look at him like that. Not hatred. Recognition. Like she was seeing the thing in him she'd tried to bury. "Where?" Petunia croaked. Vernon puffed himself up. "Somewhere far. Somewhere safe. Somewhere normal." Harry almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. Because the hidden ink in the letter pieces, still visible to him even as they lay torn in the bin, had shifted. New words, written beneath the ripped edges like a message that didn't care about damage. Running does not change destiny. The boundary follows the bound. Harry swallowed. His scar warmed again, as if agreeing. They ended up in a hotel first. Then another. Then a third. And everywhere, the letters found them. By the second day, Vernon's face had gone a permanent shade of red. His mustache twitched constantly. He snapped at everything, the staff, the television, Dudley, Petunia. But he didn't touch Harry. Not once. Something about the invisible boundary had traveled with Harry like a quiet law. And Vernon felt it. On the third night, during a storm that turned the sky into a boiling bruise. Vernon drove them onto a narrow road that led to the sea. Harry didn't know where they were. The world outside the car looked blurred and gray, the headlights cutting weak tunnels through rain. Vernon muttered to himself the whole drive. Freaks, unnatural, ruining my life, I'll show them. Petunia said nothing. Her hands were clenched in her lap so tight her knuckles were white. Dudley hiccuped occasionally, clutching his favorite toy like a lifeline. Harry watched the rain smear the window, and behind his eyes the whisper returned, low, patient. They fear what they do not bind. He didn't know what that meant. But he felt it like a truth. The shack was less a building and more a stubborn pile of wood that had decided to endure. It sat on a ROCK outcropping surrounded by rough water, reachable only by a small boat Vernon rented with shaking hands and an expression like he was being forced into a crime. The storm raged. The wind screamed through cracks in the walls. The sea hurled itself against the rock like it wanted to swallow them whole. Vernon locked the door the moment they were inside. There, he said, trying to sound victorious. Let's see them deliver their stupid letters now. Harry sat on the floor because there was nowhere else. The shack smelled like damp and fish and old rot. The air tasted like salt and fear. Petunia tried to light a candle with trembling hands. Dudley whimpered. Harry's scar began to throb. Not like before. Not pressure. This was anticipation. Like the world was holding its breath. Midnight struck. Somewhere outside, something massive moved through the storm. The shack's door shuddered. Vernon grabbed a rifle from the corner. Harry hadn't even noticed it earlier, but of course. Vernon would rather bring a gun than a plan. Stay back. Vernon shouted at the door, voice cracking. I've got a gun. The whisper behind Harry's eyes deepened. A boundary is a promise. A promise must be answered. The door exploded inward. Not from magic. From force. A giant silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by lightning, a man, but bigger, broader, dripping rain like he'd stepped out of the sea itself. Wild hair. Beard like a storm cloud. A long coat stretched over shoulders like a baldur's. Harry's heart stopped. Not from fear. From recognition. Because when the man stepped inside, Harry saw something that made his scar flare like a brand. The man's eyes weren't just looking at him. They were finding him, like he'd been searching for a long time. And then the giant spoke. Voice rolling through the shack like thunder. Harry Potter. Vernon raised the rifle, trembling. I demand you leave at once. This is private property. The giant barely glanced at him. Shut it, he said, casually. Like swatting a fly. Then he turned fully toward Harry, and in that moment the hidden ink in Harry's mind, those rune words, lit up, aligning into a single clear thought. The messenger has arrived. The giant smiled, and it was strangely kind. A wizard, Harry, he said. Harry's scar burned. And under the burning, a second voice, ancient and cool, whispered a name like a key turning in a lock. Hagrid. Gatekeeper. Harry stared at him, shaking. Who are you? Harry managed. Hagrid's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, like he sensed there was more behind the question than an 11-year-old could possibly mean. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, dry despite the storm. He placed it gently in Harry's hands. This, Hagrid said softly, is a letter. Harry looked down. The envelope was the same cream paper, the same green ink. But when his fingers touched it, the hidden ink bloomed again, clearer than ever, W. Written beneath the ordinary words like a secret confession. Emrys awakens. Camelot watches. Harry's throat went tight. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the world tilted. And Harry Potter opened the letter that would change his life, twice over. The next morning, the storm had calmed into a steady drizzle, as if the sky was exhausted from screaming. Hagrid cooked sausages that tasted like salt and smoke and something almost comforting. Dudley refused to eat. Vernon refused to speak. Petunia watched Harry the way people watched a crack in a dam, silent, terrified, and waiting for the flood. Harry barely noticed any of them. Because the letter in his hands felt heavier than paper. It felt like a threshold. And when Harry looked at the words, the hidden ink shimmered beneath the ord. A nary green script like a second heartbeat. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Ellipsis. Emrys awakens. Camelot watches. Harry's scar gave a faint pulse, as if it approved of the message. Hagrid leaned back in his chair, the shack creaking beneath his weight. Right then, he said, like this was all perfectly normal. We'll get ye sorted proper. School supplies, books, wand. Harry's fingers tightened around the letter. Why does it do that? Hagrid blinked. Do what? Harry hesitated. He couldn't exactly say there are secret words under the words that call me Emrys without sounding like he'd finally snapped. So he tried the closest truth. It changes when I touch it. Hagrid's face shifted. Not surprise. Something older. Something like caution stepping into a room. Well, he said slowly, magic does that sometimes. Specially round, special folk. Harry's scar warmed, and an impulse rose in him, sharp, irrational, certain. Ask the gatekeeper about boundaries. Harry swallowed. You called yourself, gatekeeper. Quote. Hagrid scratched the back of his head, suddenly fascinated by the ceiling. Ah, well, that's me job title, see. Keeper o' keys and grounds. Means I handle entrances. The word entrances landed in Harry like a rung clicking into place. Boundary. Threshold. Gate. Harry looked down at the hidden ink again. It didn't change this time. It was as if it had already been answered. They left the Dursleys behind with a single sentence. Ye'll be dealin' with me now, Hagrid told Vernon, who had looked ready to pop like an angry kettle. And, if I hear you. They mistreated Harry again, I'll have words. Vernon tried to sneer. Tried. But whatever invisible law had settled around Harry in Privet Drive still lingered. Vernon's eyes flicked away first. Petu. Nia's gaze followed Harry as he stepped out into the wet air. For the first time, her face looked small. Remember, she whispered, voice almost lost under the wind, they always take what they want. Harry didn't know who they were. But the Merlin echo in his bones, quiet and cold, answered anyway. So do we, when we forget the cost. Harry shivered, and followed Hagrid into the world. London felt wrong at first. Not because it was strange. Harry had seen London on school trips, from the back of a bus where teachers told him not to touch anything. It felt wrong because his scar wouldn't stop pulsing. Every time they passed an old building, every time they crossed a bridge, every time they stepped onto stone instead of concrete, the pressure behind his eyes strengthened like a compass needle snapping toward true north. Hagrid chatted as they walked, buying him an ice cream, talking about Hogwarts houses and ghosts and moving staircases like he was describing a theme park. Harry nodded, but his attention kept slipping sideways, to the edges of things. Walls. Doorways. Bridges. He could feel them now, invisible lines where the world decided who belonged and who didn't. And beneath those lines, faintly, like writing under parchment, patterns, runes, not visible, exactly, just felt, like a word at the tip of his tongue. When Hagrid finally led him into a shabby little pub called the Leaky Cauldron. Harry's scar flared so hard he nearly stumbled. The pub looked ordinary enough, dim, cramped, full of chatter and smoke. But the moment Harry crossed the threshold, the air thickened with old magic. Not the sharp, sparkling kind you imagined from fairy tales. This was settled magic, like dust in the rafters. Like a building that had been enchanted so long the enchantments had seeped into the wood. The hidden ink in his mind stirred. Crossing acknowledged. Ward recognizes its maker. Harry's breath caught. Maker. He hadn't made anything. Had he? Hagrid clapped him on the shoulder, nearly knocking him into a table. Right then. Welcome, Harry. This is where it all starts. People turned to look. Whispers rose like sparks in dry grass. That's him, the boy. No, look, his eyes. Is that? Harry shrank instinctively, but the invisible boundary around him didn't shrink. If anything, it felt firmer, as though the world itself bristled at too many eyes. Hagrid didn't seem to notice. He led Harry to a brick wall behind the pub, pulled out a pink umbrella, and tapped a specific pattern. The bricks shuddered, a gap opened, and the world split wide. Diagon Alley spilled before Harry like a secret the earth had kept too long. Cobbled streets, crooked shops, sunlight caught in floating dust, owls swooping overhead, cauldrons stacked like black towers, robes swishing. Laughter ringing, 1,000 strange scents, parchment, spice, metal, smoke, sugar. Harry stood still, heart hammering. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was his. And beneath the wonder, that ancient whisper returned with the calm certainty of someone who had seen this place built from nothing. A marketplace is a covenant. A covenant can be broken. Harry didn't know why the thought came. But it made him glance at the alley's entrance, the shifting bricks, the hidden door, the way the world had chosen to conceal itself. A boundary, honored, or enforced. Hagrid started walking, and Harry forced himself to move. They went first to a tall white building that made Harry's teeth ache just to look at it. Gringotts Wizarding Bank. It rose like a spear of polished stone. Too bright against the sky, guarded by pale creatures with sharp smiles and clever eyes. Goblins. Harry had never seen one before, but the Merlin echo in him reacted like a muscle remembering an old injury. Do not owe them. Do not bargain without terms. Harry's scar throbbed in warning. Hagrid didn't notice. Got ter get ye some money, he said cheerfully. And, I've got a little errand fair Dumbledore. Harry's stomach twisted at the name, Dumbledore. He didn't know why. The name simply pulled at something inside him, like a hook catching on thread. Hagrid handed him a small golden key. That's fair or vault. I'll be right here. The goblin at the counter took the key and examined it with a magnifying glass as if it were a crime. Then its eyes flicked to Harry. And held. For a heartbeat. Harry saw something in that gaze that made his scar burn. Recognition. Not of Harry Potter. Of whatever was underneath. The goblin's thin lips parted. It spoke, voice smooth as coin. The key accepts you. Harry's hand went cold around the counter edge. The key, he repeated. The goblin smiled wider. Keys do not only open doors, human child. Some keys open old agreements. Hagrid returned before Harry could respond, face suddenly more serious. Come on, he said quickly. Let's get down. The cart ride through Gringotts was like being swallowed by the earth and carried by greed. They shot down twisting tracks. Wind tore at Harry's hair. Lanterns flashed by like fireflies trapped in stone. The deeper they went, the more Harry's scar warmed, as if the very rock remembered something. At his vault, Hagrid unlocked the door and stepped back. Gold glittered inside, piles of coins, stacks of sickles and galleons, silver and bronze. Harry stared, stunned. All yours, Hagrid said softly. Parents left it fair yea. Harry's throat tightened. For a moment, the wonder hurt. He stepped forward, and as he did, the faintest shimmer appeared along T. He vault's inner arch, like a line of invisible writing catching the lantern light. Harry blinked. The writing was not goblin-made. It was older. And it answered him the way the hidden ink had answered him. As if he'd brought the right kind of presence into the right kind of place. Anchor recognized. Heir permitted. Debt. None. Harry's breath caught. An anchor. Like a thing that tied magic to the world. He reached toward the shimmer, and the moment his finger hovered near it, pain flicked behind his eyes, sharp and quick, a warning without cruelty. Not yet. Too soon. Harry jerked his hand back, rubbing his forehead. Hagrid watched him closely now. Yea, all right. Harry forced a nod. Yeah, but his heart was racing. Because the bank, this ancient place of contracts and rules, as reacting to him like he belonged in its oldest layers. And that scared him more than the piles of gold. Diagon Alley blurred into a series of purchases that should have felt ordinary, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Books stacked in his arms. Robes fitted over his shoulders. Quills, ink, parchment. Everywhere Harry went, he felt it. The edges of spells, the faint hum of wards, the quiet language of old protections written into wood and stone. Some shops felt new, loud, bright, messy magic. Others felt ancient and cautious, like they'd been built by people who understood that power always collected debts. And then they stepped into a shop that felt like stepping into a cathedral made of silence. Ollivanders. The bell above the door tinkled once, and the sound seemed to travel far, far deeper than the shop itself. Dust hung in the air like sleeping memories. Stacks of narrow boxes rose to the ceiling, endless and uneven, as if the shop had been collecting time. Harry's scar flared. Not pain. Not warning. Recognition. The whisper in his bones spoke with rare clarity. A wand as a compromise. A man emerged from the shadows behind the counter, pale-eyed, hair like wisps of silver smoke. His gaze was sharp and unsettling, like it could peel back skin and read what was underneath. Mr. Potter, he said, before Hagrid could introduce him. Yes, I thought we would be seeing you soon. Harry's mouth went dry. How do you? I remember every wand I've ever sold, the man said, as if that answered everything. I remember the wand that did that to you. His eyes flicked to Harry's scar. And the shop seemed to go colder. Harry felt something push behind his eyes, old anger, old grief. Not his. Someone else's memory brushing the surface. Firelight. Stone. A tower. A promise. Harry gripped his hands into fists to keep them steady. Ollivander smiled faintly. Curious, he murmured. Very curious indeed. Hagrid shifted awkwardly. Harry's here to get his wand. Of course. Ollivander said, and moved like a ghost between shelves. Wands choose the wizard. He returned with a box. 11 inches. Holly. Phoenix feather core. Harry's pulse skipped. That's the brother wand, Ollivander said gently. Yes, the one that. Harry's scar burned hard, and the invisible boundary around him tightened like a clenched jaw. Ollivander paused, head tilting. Ah, he whispered. I see. He offered the box anyway. Harry opened it, lifted the wand, smooth, warm in his palm, and for a heartbeat, something inside him fit. Not perfectly. But enough that the air around him softened. Swish, Ollivander instructed. Harry swished. A shower of golden sparks erupted. Hagrid beamed. Brilliant. But the moment the sparks faded, the wand in Harry's hand vibrated, once. Twice, like an animal trying to flee. Harry's scar throbbed. It fears the other voice. Harry stared at the wand. He felt it now, its reluctance, its uncertainty. Like T had chosen Harry Potter but didn't know what to do with whatever else was inside him. Ollivander's eyes gleamed. Interesting, he whispered. You have more than one rhythm. Hagrid frowned. What do ye mean? Ollivander didn't answer immediately. He drifted back into the shelves, pulled out a second box, and returned slowly, as if carrying something that could bite. This, he said softly, is not for sale in the usual sense. It has waited. Harry's scar flared hot, and the hidden ink in his mind snapped into clarity. Legacy tool. Not master. Ollivander opened the box. Inside lay a wand darker than the first, smooth and old, with faint carvings along its length that weren't decoration. They were runes, shallow but precise. Harry's breath caught. He didn't know the runes. But his bones did. His skin did. The Merlin echo in him leaned forward like a sleeping lion lifting its head. A key. Harry's hand moved without permission. The moment his fingers touched the rune wand, the shop's air changed. Not sparks. Not light. A low hum spread through the walls, through the boxes, through the dust itself, as if the entire shop was one vast instrument, and someone had just struck a chord. Ollivander's face went very still. Hagrid's umbrella trembled in his grip. Harry's scar burned so fiercely tears sprang to his eyes, yet beneath the pain came a strange calm, a sense of alignment. Harry lifted the wand, and the runes along its body glowed faintly, like embers under ash. No explosion, no fireworks, just quiet authority settling into place. Harry breathed out, and the invisible boundary around him steadied, cleaner, sharper. He swished once. The air in front of him folded, not visibly, not like a curtain, but like the world had blinked. A single candle on the counter went out. Not extinguished by wind, simply, denied. Ollivander's whisper was barely audible. Merlin. Harry's grip tightened. What did you say? Ollivander's pale eyes met his. Nothing, he said. But his voice was different now, careful. Nothing at all, Mr. Potter. Hagrid shifted, suddenly uneasy. Ollivander, is that wand safe? Ollivander's smile was thin. Safe is a word for people who have never built cages for storms. Harry's head pounded. He could feel the cost already, like his magic had reached for something deeper and his body had flinched away from the depth. He steadied himself, swallowing. I'll take, which one? He asked, voice rough. Ollivander looked at both wands, then at Harry, as if weighing two futures. The holly wand will serve you in school, he said at last. It belongs to the world as it is. Then he glanced at the rune wand, and the faintest hint of respect crossed his face. And that one, he said softly, belongs to the world beneath. Hagrid opened his mouth, but Ollivander cut him off with a single look. Harry understood without being told. The second wand was not meant to be waved around in a classroom. Not yet. Not until he understood what it was anchoring inside him. So Harry made a choice that felt like the first adult choice of his life. I'll take the holly wand, he said. And after a heartbeat, he added, quieter. But, I want to know about the other. Ollivander's eyes gleamed. Of course you do. He slid the rune wand back into its box with reverence and tucked it away behind the counter, as if hiding a blade. Later, Ollivander murmured, when you are ready to pay the costs of remembering. Harry left the shop with a wand in his pocket and a second heartbeat in his bones. On the way out, Hagrid guided him through crowds toward a tall, red brick building. King's Cross Station. Harry's stomach flipped. The wizarding world had felt strange, but it had also felt like it wanted him. This was the ordinary world again, loud and crowded and indifferent. Hagrid led him to a barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Right, Hagrid said, glancing around. This bit's important. Yay, don't stop. Yay, walk straight at it. Like you mean it. Harry stared at the wall. Stone. Solid. Real. And yet his scar pulsed in time with it, like the barrier was humming a note only he could hear. A threshold. A gate. A boundary. Harry took a breath and walked. The wall swallowed him. For a heartbeat, the world turned to cool mist and rushing wind. Then he stepped out into a place that looked like the inside of a dream, steam curling from a scarlet train, people in robes, owls hooting, trunks rattling, laughter bright and nervous. Platform 9 3/4. Harry stood still, awed. Hagrid grinned. There ye are. All right now, I've got ter go. Ye'll be fine. Harry turned to him, panic flaring. Wait. But Hagrid was already stepping back, as if Harry had crossed into a space that was no longer his to guide. Just remember, Hagrid said, voice suddenly softer. Some things in our world, they look like doors, but they're really tests. If ye feel something watchin', don't panic. Just keep her head. Harry's scar warmed. As if agreeing again, Hagrid left. And Harry was alone in the crowd. He gripped his ticket, his wand, the strap of his trunk. Then he felt it. A gaze. Not from the people. From somewhere else. Harry turned slowly. For a second, he thought it was just an old man in the distance, tall, robed, silver beard catching the steam, eyes twinkling behind half-moon glasses. But the moment Harry looked directly at him, the old man's expression shifted, not surprise, not warmth. Recognition. Measured. As if he were seeing a chess piece that had just moved in a way no one predicted. Then, just as quickly, the man turned and vanished into the steam. Harry's scar burned. The whisper behind his eyes spoke, calm as a judge. The architect has noticed the builder. Harry's throat tightened. He didn't know who the man was. But he knew, deep down, that his life had just acquired another watcher. The train ride was a blur of introductions, sweets, and stares. Harry found an empty compartment and sat by the window, watching the station slide away. The countryside unfolded beyond, green and wide, and for the first time he realized how little of the world he'd actually seen. A girl with bushy hair appeared at the door eventually, asking if she could sit, talking quickly about spells and books and how she'd learned most of the course already. Harry said yes because saying no felt rude, and also because her presence made the boundary around him soften. A boy with a freckled face and an easy grin appeared later, of faring chocolate frogs and stories that made the world feel less sharp. Harry ate, listened, smiled when they smiled. But beneath it all, his scar continued to pulse at odd moments, when the train passed near standing stones. When it crossed old bridges, when it cut through fog that clung like memory. He felt threads in the land. Ancient ward lines. And once, only once, he saw something outside the window that made his breath catch. A lake, silver beneath the afternoon sky. For a heartbeat, he saw a shape beneath its surface. Not a fish, not a shadow, a glint of metal, a sword. Harry blinked, and the moment was gone. But the Merlin echo in him whispered, soft and unyielding. Not yet, but soon. Hogwarts rose out of the night like a fortress carved from starlight. The boats carried them across the black lake. Lanterns bobbing, the castle's windows glowing warm and distant. Harry should have felt safe. Instead, his scar burned steadily, as if the whole castle was one enormous rune. Humming with layered enchantments. Hogwarts was old, older than most things. And old things remembered. They filed into the great hall, candles floating overhead like captured stars, 4 long tables filled with students. The ceiling enchanted to show the night sky. Harry's heart hammered. A woman with sharp features and a voice like a blade called names from a roll. Students stepped forward, sat on a stool, and had a patched old hat placed on their heads. Some shouted, Gryffindor, and cheered. Some were sent to Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Slytherin. Harry watched, stomach twisting. Then, Harry Potter. The hall went quiet in that special, hungry way crowds got when they were given a legend to stare at. Harry's hands went cold. He walked forward, each step echoing. Sat on the stool. The hat dropped over his eyes, smelling faintly of dust and something older, parchment, smoke, forgotten libraries. For a moment there was only darkness. Then a voice spoke in his mind. Ah! Harry's scar pulsed. The hat's voice sounded amused, and unsettled. This is unusual. Very unusual. Harry swallowed. Please don't put me somewhere awful. The hat chuckled softly. Oh, I hear you, Harry Potter. But I also hear. It paused. And in that pause, Harry felt it, the Merlin echo lifting its head, attentive. The hat's voice lowered, as if speaking near a sleeping dragon. Another voice. Harry's breath caught. Not a ghost, not a passenger, not a charm. A pattern. An imprint. A legacy that remembers being older than this school. The hat fell silent again. Then, very softly, as if it didn't want the hall to hear, even though no one else could. Emrys. Harry's scar burned like fire. His hands clenched on the sides of the stool. The hat's voice tightened, no longer amused. Tell me, boy, do you intend to be Harry Potter? Or do you intend to wake the one beneath? And before Harry could even form an answer, the hat whispered one final sentence that turned his blood to ice. Because something under this castle has begun to stir, and it remembers your name. The Sorting Hat didn't shout right away. It listened. Harry sat beneath it in a pocket of darkness, the great hall's noise muffled into a distant ocean. The hat's brim pressed against his forehead, and his scar throbbed like a heartbeat that wasn't his. Harry Potter, the hat murmured, thoughtful. Plenty of courage. Plenty of stubbornness. A mind that keeps looking for the rules beneath the rules. Harry swallowed. Please just, put me somewhere I can breathe. The hat's voice softened, then sharpened again. As if it had found something it didn't like. And then there's the other rhythm. Not evil. Not good. Just, old. Harry felt the Merlin echo stir, like a lion turning in its sleep. I can give you a house, the hat went on, quieter. But I cannot give you a life that stays simple. Harry's fingers curled around the edge of the stool. I don't want simple, he thought, surprised at himself. The hat gave a low, amused hum. No. You want understanding. You want names for what you feel. You want to know why doors behave like judges when you touch them. Harry's scar burned as if the hat had brushed the truth. Then the hat's voice became very firm. Ravenclaw. The hat vanished from his head. The great hall erupted. Applause and cheers surged from the table beneath a banner of blue and bronze. Harry slid off the stool on legs that felt strange, too light, too far from the floor. He walked to the Ravenclaw table, surrounded by staring eyes and whispered words. The boy who lived, he's in Ravenclaw. Did you see his scar? Did you feel that cold? A girl with long blonde hair clapped sharply, like she approved of things being done correctly. A boy with ink-stained fingers leaned forward and stared at Harry like Harry was an unsolved equation. Someone scooted aside to make room. Harry sat, trying not to look like he wanted to run. Across the hall, at the staff table, Dumbledore. He watched him over his half-moon glasses. His eyes twinkled, but there was something else in that twinkle. Something measuring. And as Harry looked back, his scar gave a small, warning pulse. Not pain. A reminder. You have been seen. The first week at Hogwarts was a storm of newness. Stairs moved when they felt like it. Portraits talked back. Doors refused to open unless you said, please. In a tone that sounded like you meant it. Harry learned quickly that Hogwarts was not a building. It was a mind, and that mind loved rules. Which should have been comforting. Except Harry could feel the older rules beneath the school's cheerful chaos, like deep roots under a bright garden. On the second morning, he woke before the others in his dormitory. The Ravenclaw tower was high and drafty, with windows that made the sky feel close enough to touch. He dressed quietly and walked to the common room. The eagle knocker on the door asked him a riddle. Harry answered without thinking, because the moment it asked, something in his bones leaned forward and nudged the answer into place. The door opened. Harry stood still, hand on the handle. He hadn't known the riddle. But his body had. The Merlin echo murmured. Satisfied. Questions are keys. Always have been. Harry exhaled shakily. That day, he met the girl from the train properly. Hermione Granger sat in the library with a stack of books that looked like they could crush a small horse. Her hair was wilder in the castle's humidity, and she spoke like her thoughts were racing each other to get out first. I thought you might come here, she said, sounding oddly pleased. You were looking at the castle like you wanted to take it apart and rebuild it. Harry blinked. Was I? A bit, Hermione said briskly, then slid a book across the table. Hogwarts, a history. You should read the chapter on the founders. The enchantments are layered. It's fascinating. Harry's scar warmed faintly as his fingers touched the cover. Hermione noticed. Her eyes narrowed. Does your scar do that a lot? Harry hesitated. Then, because her tone wasn't mocking and because she looked genuinely curious, he gave her the closest safe truth. It reacts, he said. To old things. Hermione's expression turned sharp with interest. Runes do that, she said immediately. Ancient wards, too. Have you taken a look at the ward lines around the castle? They're incredible. Harry stared at her. You can see them, he asked. Hermione blinked, then looked embarrassed. Not see them, exactly. But you can infer them. Based on the way the staircases move. The way the portraits behave, the way the doors. She stopped, then leaned in, voice dropping. You can feel them, can't you? Harry didn't answer. His scar pulsed once. Hermione's eyes widened. Oh, she whispered. Oh, that's, Harry, that's. Not here, Harry said quickly, surprising himself with how urgently the words came out. Hermione swallowed and nodded, suddenly serious. Right, not here. Harry didn't know why he trusted her. Maybe because she treated magic like a subject, not a circus trick. Maybe because when he spoke, she listened. And maybe, because the Merlin echo didn't recoil from her the way it recoiled from goblins and locked vaults and certain names. It simply watched her with quiet approval, like a craftsman noticing another pair of steady hands. Ron Weasley arrived in Harry's life the way a warm thing arrives in winter, unexpected, loud, and immediately hard to lose. He wasn't in Ravenclaw, but he drifted into Harry's orbit anyway. Usually with food and a story and a grin that made the castle feel less like a test. I'm telling you, Ron said one evening in the corridor outside the library, the stairs do it on purpose. They wait until you're late and then, bam, switch direction like it's funny. Hermione sniffed. It's not funny. It's a complex internal routing enchantment that. Ron waved a hand. It's funny when it happens to Malfoy. Harry smiled. And it felt strange, like his face wasn't used to the shape. Ron noticed. See, you're learning. Hogwarts isn't all terrifying corridors and people staring at you. Harry's scar gave a tiny pulse. Like it wanted to disagree. But Harry didn't. Because for the first time, he had friends. Not people who tolerated him. Friends. And the Merlin echo, quiet, watchful, didn't fight it. It settled. Like something ancient had finally found a place to rest. On the third Friday of term, the first warning arrived in the form of a closed door. Harry was hurrying to Charms with Hermione. Their arms full of books and parchment. The corridor they usually used was crowded with older students, so Hermione tugged him toward a side passage. This way is faster, she said. I checked the route yesterday. It should. She stopped mid-sentence. So did Harry. The corridor ahead looked normal at first glance. Stone walls, torches in brackets, a suit of armor leaning tiredly against the wall. But the air thickened the closer they stepped. Harry's scar burned, not with pain but with warning so clear it might as well have been a hand on his chest. Hermione frowned. That's odd. It wasn't. Harry took one step forward. The air pushed back. Not like wind. Like refusal. His breath caught. His skin prickled. He tried again, and the refusal sharpened. Cold pressure pressed against his sternum, gentle but absolute, like the world saying, no. Hermione's eyebrows shot up. Did you feel that? Harry nodded slowly. Ron, behind them, leaned around. Feel what? Hermione stepped forward cautiously and bumped straight into the invisible barrier. Ow! She yelped, stumbling back. Ron's eyes went wide. What? Did you just run into air? It's a ward, Hermione said, rubbing her shoulder. Voice thrilled despite the pain. A very strong one. Harry stared down the corridor. The torches flickered slightly, as if amused. The suit of armor seemed to straighten, metal joints creaking. Then, without anyone touching it, a door at the far end of the corridor swung open a crack. A low growl rolled out, deep enough to vibrate in the stone. Ron's face went pale. "Nope," he said immediately. "Absolutely not." Hermione's eyes were shining. "Did you hear that? Something's in there." Harry's scar burned hotter. Underneath the heat came the Merlin echo, calm as old law. "Not for children. Not without permission." Harry's throat tightened. He should have walked away. He meant to. But his hand lifted on its own and pressed against the stone wall beside the corridor entrance. The moment his palm touched the cold rock, the world changed. The stone wasn't stone. It was a page. And the ink was invisible lines of magic, layered and interlocked, humming under his skin. Harry's breath stopped. He could read it. Not the words, there weren't words. The rules. A ward wasn't a wall. It was an argument written into reality. This ward argued, keep out those who cannot bear the consequence. Keep out those who do not belong. Keep out those who would break what they cannot mend. Harry's scar throbbed hard. Hermione stared at him. "Harry, what are you doing?" Harry didn't answer. Because as his mind traced the ward lines, something inside him aligned, like a lock recognizing the shape of a key. The Merlin echo rose, stretching through his veins. "Negotiate. Don't break." Harry's fingers moved slightly on the wall, not carving, not scratching, just placing intent. A tiny adjustment, not to the ward's strength, to its question. He didn't tell it to open. He asked it a different thing. "I am not here to enter. I am here to understand." The ward's hum shifted. The pressure on his chest eased, barely. Enough that Harry knew it had heard him. He leaned closer, forehead nearly touching the stone. His scar burned like a star. And behind his eyes, a memory flashed so vividly he tasted it: candle wax and iron, a tower room. A circle drawn in salt and blood, and a voice, his voice, but older, speaking to something furious behind a door. "You may rage, but you may not cross. Not unless you accept the terms." Harry blinked. His vision swam. His nose felt suddenly warm. He lifted a hand and saw bright red on his fingers. Hermione gasped. "Harry, your nose." Ron made a sound like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Mate, maybe stop touching cursed walls." Quote. Harry swayed. The ward's hum sharpened again, not angry but stern, like a teacher correcting a student who'd overreached. The pressure in his skull spiked. Pain lanced behind his eyes. Harry stumbled back, hand slipping from the stone. The corridor air snapped back into place. The invisible barrier returned to full strength. The door at the end of the hallway slammed shut. The growl cut off. Silence rushed in. Harry pressed the back of his hand to his nose, trying to stop the bleeding. Hermione grabbed his wrist. "You read it," she whispered, eyes wide. "Harry, you read the ward." Quote. Harry started, but the migraine hit like a hammer. He squeezed his eyes shut and breathed through it, chest rising and falling fast. The Merlin echo inside him spoke, not unkindly. "That was tier 2. Threading. And you paid." Harry opened his eyes slowly. Hermione was staring at him like he'd just performed a miracle and a mistake at the same time. Ron looked half furious, half scared. "You're bleeding. Again. From magic." Harry wiped his nose with his sleeve, embarrassed and shaken. "I didn't mean to." Hermione swallowed. "But you did. You changed a ward." Harry glanced back at the corridor. It looked normal again, except for the feeling in his scar, an aftertaste of old power and older refusal. He hadn't broken it. He hadn't opened it. He had simply touched the edge of something far bigger than him. And it had touched back. Ron grabbed Harry's arm. "Come on. Charms. Before we die in a hallway." Hermione nodded too quickly. "Yes. Charms. And, Harry, later. We should." "No," Harry said, sharper than he meant. Then he softened his voice. "Later. Not here." Hermione closed her mouth and nodded again. They walked away. Harry could still feel the corridor behind him. Not like a place. Like a locked memory in the castle's bones. And for the rest of the day, even as Professor Flitwick made feathers float in Herm. Ione answered every question like she'd been born holding a textbook. Harry's scar kept humming with one simple, chilling truth. The ward had recognized him. Not as Harry Potter. As something older. And somewhere beyond that locked door, something had growled like it recognized him too. That night, Ravenclaw Tower was filled with soft conversation and turning pages. The fire crackled. Rain tapped the windows. Harry sat at a table with Hermione and a half-finished essay, but the words kept blurring. His head still ached. His scar still felt warm. Hermione kept sneaking glances at him case she wanted to speak and didn't know how. Finally she whispered, "Harry, how did you know what to do?" Harry stared at the ink on his parchment. He could lie. He could say he guessed. He could say it was luck. But Hermione's eyes weren't accusing. They were asking. So Harry said the truth that scared him the least. It felt like, remembering, he murmured. Hermione went still. Remembering what? Harry swallowed. His scar pulsed. In the firelight, for a heartbeat, he saw the faintest shimmer on his own wrist, as if invisible runes were sleeping beneath his skin. He rubbed the spot quickly, and it vanished. "I don't know," Harry said, voice quiet. "But, it knew me." Hermione's breath hitched. "The ward." Harry nodded. Hermione leaned closer, voice barely audible. "Harry, if that ward recognized you, that means it was built by someone who left an imprint. A signature. A maker," Harry finished, and the words tasted like ice. Hermione's eyes widened. "Yes." Harry's stomach tightened. Across the common room, the window showed the dark outline of the castle against the night sky. Towers like fingers, bridges like ribs, the whole structure humming with layered enchantments. Hogwarts was ancient, and ancient things did not forget their builders. Harry's scar flared once, sharply, as if something far below the castle had shifted in its sleep. A low vibrati ran through the stones, so faint no one else seemed to notice. Then, behind Harry's eyes, the Merlin echo whispered one final warning before sinking back into uneasy silence. "The corridor is not the danger. It is the lock." Harry's quill slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. Hermione startled. "Harry." Harry stared at the window, at the castle, at the night. And for the first time since stepping into the wizarding world, he felt it clearly. Hogwarts wasn't just a school. It was a sealed promise. And something inside it had begun to wake up, because Harry had come home. Harry didn't sleep much after the corridor. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt that invisible pressure again, like the castle was a giant hand resting on his skull, patient and heavy. He could still taste the ward lines in the air, still sense the sealed door like a toothache in the back of his mind. And beneath all of it, something else. A quiet stirring, deep under stone. Like a giant turning in its sleep. So Harry did what he always did when the world became too large. He tried to understand it. He buried himself in the library. Hermione was already there, of course, she always was, surrounded by books like a fortress of paper. Ron showed up intermittently with snacks and complaints about moving staircases and a running list of people he thought should be banned from owning cats. Harry sat with them at a corner table that smelled like ink and dust and old secrets, and he pretended the castle wasn't watching him. But the castle was. He felt it in the way certain doors opened a half-second early when he approached. In the way torches brightened just slightly as he passed, as if the flame itself was curious. And in the way his scar warmed whenever he got too close to anything ancient. It was a map. A painful one. The first time he saw the mirror of her eyes, it wasn't because he was looking for it. It was because he was trying to get away. It happened late one night. When the common room had gone quiet and Harry couldn't stand the feeling of being enclosed, of sleeping within walls that hummed with wards he couldn't stop sensing. He told himself he was only going to walk a bit. Just to breathe. Just to let the castle's pressure slide off his skin. He threw on his cloak and slipped into the corridor. Hogwarts at night was different. It wasn't louder. It wasn't scarier in obvious ways. It was older. Portraits murmured in their frames, voices low. The staircases moved with less fuss, as if they had fewer people to entertain. The stone itself felt colder underfoot. And the air tasted faintly of rain even inside. Harry walked without a destination. And slowly, without realizing it, his scar began to pull. Left at a tapestry. Right at a suit of armor that seemed to turn slightly as he passed. Down a staircase that wasn't there yesterday. Harry's heart beat faster. He didn't like the feeling of being guided by something he didn't understand, but the pull didn't feel hostile. It felt inevitable. Like gravity. At the end of a narrow corridor, he found a door he'd never seen before. It wasn't locked. It didn't push back. It waited. Harry hesitated, hand hovering over the handle. The Merlin echo stirred behind his eyes like a slow inhale. Some doors are not opened. They are accepted. Harry swallowed. Then he turned the handle. The room beyond was empty except for one object. A mirror. Tall, ornate, framed in gold so old it had dulled at the edges, carved with strange symbols that looked almost like runes, but not any runes Harry had seen in books. The mirror stood on clawed feet, as if it could walk away if it chose. In the dim torchlight, the surface looked like liquid glass. Harry stepped forward. His scar flared, not in pain, but in shock so sharp it stole his breath. Because the mirror didn't feel like an object. It felt like a judgment. A magical thing designed to look into you and decide what you were made of. Harry stared at the inscription across the top. The words were backwards, or they should have been. But as Harry read them, something in his mind turned the letters the right way without effort. As if the mirror itself was helping. Erise drow irate. Harry frowned. Hermione would know. But Hermione wasn't here. Harry leaned closer. In the glass, he saw. Not himself. Not a boy in pajamas with messy hair and a scar. He saw a hall lit by candlelight. He saw stone arches that weren't Hogwarts stone, older, wilder, built as if the builders were arguing with the land. He saw a round table. Not a metaphor. A real table, carved with symbols that pulsed like veins of light. And at the head of it, he saw himself. Older. Not an old man, not gray and bent, just formed. Like someone who had carried heavy things for so long they'd become part of his bones. His eyes were clear. His face was calm in a way Harry had never been. There was no crown, no throne, just a simple cloak and a presence that made the air itself seem to listen. And beside him, on the table, lay a sword. Not a weapon laid there casually. A symbol, a promise. And behind him, standing in a semicircle as if the table was a heart they protected, were people in armor and robes and worn traveling clothes, faces half-shadowed, watching him with the solemnity of those who followed a leader they had chosen. Harry's throat tightened. He didn't want it. Not the table. Not the expectation. Not the weight in those gazes. The mirror shimmered, and the scene shifted. The hall faded. The round table dissolved into mist. And suddenly Harry saw something else. A tower. A cold room. A circle etched into stone. A door made of black iron, covered in binding symbols. And on the other side of that door, darkness. Not empty darkness. Hungry darkness. Something that pressed against the barrier like a tide, patient and furious. Harry's scar burned so hot it felt like someone had pressed a brand to his skin. The Merlin echo whispered, low and urgent. The lock remembers. The key has returned. Harry stumbled back, heart racing. His reflection didn't move. It stood there in the mirror, older Harry. The table behind him, the sword, the silent company, watching Harry Potter with something like sorrow. Then the older version of him raised one hand. Not to wave, not to summon, to warn. The mirror surface rippled. And for the first time, something came through from the reflection, not an image, but a sensation, like cold fingers brushing the inside of Harry's skull. A single thought, crisp and heavy as carved stone. Do not wake it alone. Harry's knees went weak. He grabbed the mirror's frame to steady himself, and the moment his fingers touched the gold, his scar pulsed with a different kind of warning, sharp and immediate. Balance. Cost. Harry let go. His breath came too fast. His mind spun. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't wanted any of it. He just wanted to be a kid who went to school. But the mirror didn't care what he wanted. It showed what he desired. And the terrifying part was, some part of him did want it. Not the glory, not the worship, but the control, the ability to build a boundary so strong nothing could ever hurt him again. The ability to make the world obey rules. Harry's fingers curled into fists. That's not me, he whispered at the mirror. The older reflection stared back, calm. And the Merlin echo whispered, almost gently. It can be, if you choose. Harry backed away. The room felt suddenly too small, too heavy. He turned sharply and left. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he couldn't stay in front of that mirror, because if he stayed, he might start believing the reflection. And if he believed it, he might start wanting the table. And wanting was the first step toward becoming someone who thought they had the right to decide things for everyone else. Harry ran. He didn't get far, because Hogwarts, apparently, had decided it was time for him to meet another Watcher. Harry rounded a corner and nearly crashed into a tall figure in a long robe. He skidded to a stop, heart hammering. Dumbledore stood in the corridor as if he'd been waiting there for hours, hands folded, silver beard catching the torchlight. His eyes twinkled. Harry hated the twinkle. It felt like being seen too clearly. "Good evening, Harry," Dumbledore said softly. "Out for a stroll?" Harry's mouth went dry. "I got lost." Dumbledore's gaze slid past him, down the corridor toward the door Harry had just left. "Did you?" Dumbledore asked, voice still gentle, but the question carried weight. Harry's scar warmed faintly. Not warning this time. Tension. Like two old wards brushing against each other. Harry forced himself to breathe. "I couldn't sleep." "A familiar problem," Dumbledore murmured. They stood in silence for a moment. The castle around them creaked quietly, like a ship settling on the tide. Then Dumbledore spoke again, and the softness in his voice didn't change, but the words did. "Your magic is waking," he said. Harry's stomach dropped. He didn't answer. Dumbledore didn't push immediately. He simply watched Harry with that infuriating calm, as if he'd been expecting this conversation for a long time. Finally, Harry asked the question that burned in his throat. "What do you know about me?" he demanded, voice shaking with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite fear. Dumbledore's eyes flickered, just once. Not guilt. Not surprise. Calculation. "I know," Dumbledore said slowly, "that you are Harry Potter." Harry laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's not an answer." "No," Dumbledore agreed. "It is not." He stepped closer. And Harry felt it, the invisible pressure that had stopped Vernon's hand, the quiet boundary around him. It reacted to Dumbledore. Not with hostility. With caution. Like it recognized Dumbledore as someone powerful enough to test its edges. Dumbledore's gaze went briefly to Harry's scar. "Your scar has always been complicated," he said. Harry's hand went to his forehead instinctively. Dumbledore's voice softened again, but there was steel underneath now. "Tell me, Harry," he said, "what did you see tonight?" Harry's mind flashed to the table, the sword, the older reflection, the iron door with the hungry darkness behind it. He could tell Dumbledore. He could ask for help. But the Merlin echo whispered, quiet as falling ash. "Some knowledge is leverage. Once given, it cannot be taken back." Harry swallowed. He thought of the way Dumbledore had looked at him on the platform, recognition like a chess player seeing a piece move unexpectedly. Harry had been controlled his whole life. Cupboard, chores, silence. He didn't want to be controlled again, not even by someone who smiled kindly. So he chose a truth that was safe. "A mirror," Harry said. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "Ah." Harry watched his face carefully. "Yes." Dumbledore knew. The fact that he didn't look surprised was answer enough. "It can be a dangerous thing," Dumbledore said. "To stare too long at what you want most." Harry's jaw tightened. "It showed me something I don't want." Dumbledore studied him. "Are you certain?" Harry's scar warmed, and for a heartbeat he felt the table again, felt the allure of certainty. Of power that could make rules that never broke. He hated that Dumbledore's question hit something real. "I'm certain," Harry said anyway, because he needed to be. Dumbledore sighed quietly, like a man who had already lived this argument in other forms. "Come," he said. "I will walk you back." Harry didn't move. Dumbledore paused. His eyes, for the first time, didn't twinkle. They became simply blue and very, very old. "Harry," he said, voice low, "there are forces in this castle that were bound long before you were born." Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo stirred like a warning bell. Dumbledore continued, careful and precise, as if choosing each word was a spell. "If those forces sense you," Dumbledore said, "they may reach for you. They may try to use you." Harry's throat tightened. "Use me for what?" Dumbledore held his gaze. "To open what should remain closed," he said. Silence swallowed the corridor. Harry's pulse roared in his ears. For a moment, he saw the iron door again, felt the hungry pressure behind it. And he realized, with a cold twist in his stomach. Dumbledore hadn't said this out of kindness. He had said it like a man reinforcing a boundary. Like a man drawing a line. And the line was around Harry. Harry took a slow breath. "So you do know something." Dumbledore's eyes softened again, almost sadly. "I know enough to be afraid," he admitted. "And enough to know that fear can make men do foolish things." Harry stared at him. Was that a warning? Or an excuse? He couldn't tell. He didn't like that he couldn't tell. The Merlin echo whispered, quiet and cold, trust is an oath. Oaths require terms. Harry lifted his chin. Then tell me the terms, he said. Dumbledore blinked. Not because he didn't understand. Because he hadn't expected an 11-year-old to speak like a negotiator. For the first time, the headmaster looked unsettled. Terms, Dumbledore repeated softly. Harry's scar warmed. He didn't fully understand what he was doing, but he felt the shape of it, the way a boundary became a promise. The way a promise became protection. If you want me to be careful, Harry said, voice steadier now. Then tell me what you're afraid of. Not in riddles. Dumbledore's gaze held his for a long moment. Then, very quietly, Dumbledore said, not tonight. Harry's hands clenched. Dumbledore raised a hand, palm outward, not a command, not a threat. A gesture of restraint. I will tell you, he said. When you are older. When you have more support. When you can choose without being forced by fear. Harry almost laughed again, because it sounded exactly like Vernon insisting Harry couldn't be trusted to choose anything at all. The Merlin echo murmured, almost amused. He builds cages out of concern. Still a cage. Harry swallowed the anger that rose in him, sharp and hot. Fine, Harry said tightly. But I'm not a child you can lock up. Dumbledore's expression went very still. Then, with a gentleness that felt like it had teeth, he said, no. You are not. He motioned down the corridor. Harry walked beside him, tense and silent. The castle felt like it was listening. Back in Ravenclaw Tower, Hermione was waiting. She stood near the entrance, arms folded, eyes fierce. Where have you been? She hissed the moment Harry stepped through the door. Harry blinked. How did you? I noticed you were gone, Hermione snapped. And then I noticed Professor Flitwick mentioned curfew. And then I noticed you weren't in bed. Ron emerged from behind a chair, hair sticking up. Looking half asleep and half annoyed. Mate, he groaned, you're going to give us heart attacks. Harry's chest tightened in a way that wasn't painful. They'd waited. For him. No one had ever waited for him before. I'm sorry, Harry said, and he meant it more than he'd ever meant any apology to the Dursleys. Hermione's anger wavered. What happened? She demanded, voice softer. Harry hesitated. He couldn't tell them everything. Not the iron door. Not the hungry darkness. Not the name Emrys ringing like a bell in his skull. But he could tell them enough. A mirror, Harry said quietly. It showed things. Ron blinked. Like what? Harry swallowed. Like what I might become. Hermione's eyes narrowed. Was it the mirror of her eyes? Harry stared. You know it. Hermione looked pleased despite herself. It's in Hogwarts, a history. It shows your deepest desire. Ron groaned. Of course it's in a book. Harry's scar warmed faintly. Hermione stepped closer. What did it show you? Harry hesitated, then said, a table. Hermione blinked. A table. Harry nodded, voice low. Round. Old. Like a promise. Hermione went very still. Ron frowned. That sounds not very scary. Harry looked at Ron, and the fear in his chest tightened. Not scary, Harry said, if you don't understand what it means to want to make rules for the whole world. Ron's expression shifted slightly, understanding, maybe, of something he'd never had to live. Hermione's voice dropped. And did it show anything else? Harry hesitated again. Then he chose the A-fest piece of truth that still mattered. It showed a door, he said. And something behind it. Ron's face went pale. Like a monster. Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo whispered. Not a monster. A concept that eats. Harry swallowed. Something that shouldn't be let out. Hermione's eyes widened. She looked between Harry and the common room windows as if she could see the castle's foundations from here. Harry, she whispered, Hogwarts has secrets older than the founders. Harry nodded. Ron stared at them both, then muttered, why is it always you? Harry almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Hermione reached out, hesitated, then grabbed his sleeve firmly like she was anchoring him. We'll figure it out, she said, fierce and certain. But you don't go wandering alone again. Do you understand me? Harry looked at her hand on his sleeve. Then at Ron's worried face. And for the first time since the Merlin echo had started whispering, the ancient presence inside him settled, not asleep, but calmer. Because the truth was, power woke up fastest in loneliness. And friendship, messy, loud, stubborn friendship, gave it somewhere safe to not take over. Harry nodded. Okay, he said. Hermione exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Ron yawned dramatically. Great. Now can we go back to bed before the castle eats us? Harry managed a small, real smile this time. They went to their dorms. But as Harry lay down, staring at the canopy above his bed, his scar pulsed once, sharp and cold. Not a warning from the mirror. Not a memory. A message. From beneath the castle. From the sealed thing that had sensed him through stone and wards and distance. The Merlin echo spoke, voice like iron sliding into a lock. It knows you looked. Now it will look back. Harry's breath caught. And somewhere far below, deep under Hogwarts, something ancient shifted against its bindings, slow, patient, hungry. As if testing whether the key had truly returned. Harry woke up to the feeling of being watched. Not the normal kind, no eyes in the dark, no footsteps outside a door. This was deeper. Like the castle itself had turned its attention inward, to a place most students never thought about, the foundations. The bones. The buried things. His scar pulsed once, cold and exact, like a fingertip tapping glass. It is looking back. Harry lay perfect, still in the darkness of the Ravenclaw dormitory, listening to the soft breathing of the other boys. The canopy above his bed looked too thin, too flimsy, like cloth couldn't possibly keep out what lived under stone. He tried to breathe through the pressure behind his eyes. Tried to ignore the faint vibration in the air, the way you could feel thunder before you heard it. But the vibration wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from below. A low, steady pulse that threaded through Hogwarts like a second heartbeat. Harry swallowed, slipped out of bed, and pulled on his robe with shaking hands. He didn't wander this time. He didn't let the castle guide him. He chose the one place that made sense when you were afraid of mysteries. The library. Madame Pants didn't like anyone. But she seemed to dislike sleep-deprived children even more. Harry slipped into the library before breakfast, face tucked down, hoping she wouldn't notice the way his eyes kept flicking to doorways and arches like he expected them to move. Hermione was already there. Of course she was. She looked up from a book so large it could have been used as a weapon and narrowed her eyes. You're pale, she said immediately. And you have ink on your hand. Harry glanced down. There was a faint smudge on his palm, dark, almost like soot. He hadn't touched ink since last night. His scar warmed. Residue. Threading leaves traces. Harry wiped his hand on his robe. I couldn't sleep. Hermione's expression softened by a fraction. Because of the thing under the castle. Harry stared. Hermione lifted her chin, like she dared him to deny it. You keep flinching when the stones hum. I've noticed. I'm not blind. Ron stumbled into the library behind her, hair sticking up, looking like the castle had personally offended him. Why? Ron muttered, squinting at the shelves, do you two come here like it's a hobby? It smells like paper that died 100 years ago. Hermione ignored him and leaned closer to Harry. Tell me what you felt. Harry hesitated. Then he gave her the truth he could afford. Like a heartbeat, he whispered. Not mine. Hermione's eyes lit up with the kind excitement that was both impressive and terrifying. That's an anchor. Ron blinked. A what? Hermione spoke like she was reciting something she'd been born knowing. An anchor is a magical fixed point. Something that holds an enchantment stable over long periods of time. Big wards need anchors or they decay. Especially ancient ones. Harry's scar pulsed, approving. Yes. Harry sat slowly. What kind of anchor? Hermione pulled 3 books toward them with a scraping sound that made Madame Pants glare from across the room. Could be a relic, Hermione whispered. Could be a spell lattice bound into the bedrock. Could be, her voice dropped further, eyes shining, an alchemical constant. Ron looked alarmed. That sounds like a disease. Hermione hissed, it's not a disease. Harry's head throbbed faintly. Why would Hogwarts have an anchor under it? Hermione's expression went serious. Because Hogwarts has wards older than the founders. The book says so. They didn't build the magic from nothing, they built on top of something that was already here. Harry's scar warmed, and for a moment he smelled candle wax and iron again. A tower, a circle, a door. He clenched his jaw. So, something was here before Hogwarts. Hermione nodded. Yes. Ron's face twisted. That's cheerful. Harry's hands tightened on the edge of the table. The Merlin echo whispered, calm as a warning carved into stone. Old places are built on old bargains. And bargains always have clauses. The first clue came from Hagrid. It happened the same way most dangerous information happened at Hogwarts, casually. Between bites of food, from someone who didn't realize the words mattered. They visited Hagrid on a crisp afternoon, following the path down to his hut with the lake glittering behind the trees. Fang nearly bowled Ron over in greeting. Hagrid served them rock cakes that could have been used as blunt instruments. Harry didn't mention anchors. He didn't mention the corridor. He asked about something harmless. Why are there so many protections in the school? Harry said, trying to sound like a curious student and not a walking headache. Hagrid laughed. Protections. Hogwarts has always had protections. Got tear, what with the sort o' things out there. But this year's got extra. Hermione leaned forward instantly. Extra. Why? Hagrid's face did a strange thing, half pride, half panic. Ah. Well, can't say, he said too quickly. Dumbledore's orders. Ron grinned. So it's something important. Hagrid reached for another rock cake like it could save him. Not for the likes of you. Nothin' tear worry about. Harry's scar warned. Hagrid was lying, not maliciously, but because he'd been told to. Harry kept his voice even. Is it, because of something under the castle? Hagrid choked on his tea. Hermione's eyes went wide. Ron slapped Hagrid's back, laughing. Blimey, Harry, you can't just ask that. Hagrid coughed violently, then glared at Ron as if it was Ron's fault he'd almost died. Where'd ye hear that? Hagrid demanded, eyes flicking to Harry's forehead like the scar might answer. Harry didn't blink. I felt it. Hagrid's gaze sharpened. For a moment, Harry thought Hagrid might actually refuse to speak. Then Hagrid sighed like a man surrendering to inevitability. Look, he muttered, lowering his voice. There's something being kept safe. Something valuable. Something that shouldn't fall into the wrong hands. Hermione was vibrating. What is it? Hagrid looked pained. I shouldn't. Harry's scar pulsed once, steady, calm. A boundary. A promise. Not forcing Hagrid. Just making it harder for lies to settle in the air. Hagrid swallowed. It's a stone. Ron blinked. A stone. That's it. Hermione gasped like Ron had insulted her mother. A stone can be anything. It could be. Hagrid's eyes widened. Don't go guessin'. Just leave it be, all right. Harry's heart pounded. Where did it come from? Hagrid hesitated, then muttered. Gringotts. Hermione's mouth fell open. Gringotts. Hagrid winced. Took it out o' a vault. 7:13. Same day I met you, Harry. Harry's scar flared. He remembered the vault. The shimmer of hidden writing. Anchor recognized. Heir permitted. Debt. None. Harry stared at Hagrid. Why would Dumbledore take a stone from Gringotts and hide it in Hogwarts? Hagrid's face tightened. Because it belongs here now. That's all ye need ter know. But the moment he said belongs, Harry's scar pulsed again, and the Merlin echo whispered with quiet certainty. It is not just being hidden. It is being used. The more Harry paid attention, the more the castle began to reveal its patterns. Not secrets. Patterns. The third-floor corridor wasn't just a forbidden area. It was a node, a point where ward lines converged and braided together like rope. Harry started noticing the pull whenever he got close to it. He didn't go there. He didn't touch it again. He learned his lesson about cost. But he watched from a distance, and he listened, not with ears, but with the strange new sense waking in him. And the deeper he listened, the clearer it became. There was an anchor in Hogwarts that didn't belong to the school's normal magic. It was different, smoother, more absolute, like alchemy. Or like something even older than alchemy, dressed in alchemy's language so modern wizards could handle it safely. Hermione dug through books with the determination of a bloodhound. Ron complained and kept watch for Madame Pants. Harry copied symbols. He didn't understand and then burned the parchment after, because some instinct in him insisted. Do not leave keys lying around. One evening, Hermione slammed a book onto the table so hard it made nearby students jump. I found it, she whispered, eyes blazing. Harry leaned in. Ron yawned. If it's another chapter about goblin rebellions, I'm leaving. Hermione jabbed a finger at a paragraph. Not goblins. Listen. She read quickly, barely breathing. Nicholas Flamel, noted alchemist, only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone. Ron's yawn vanished. Philosopher's Stone. Harry's scar warmed like it recognized the phrase. Even though Harry didn't. Hermione looked up triumphantly. It can turn metal into gold. And it makes an elixir of life. It keeps you alive. Ron went pale. So that's why it's valuable. Harry stared at the words, heart thudding. A stone that could keep someone alive. A stone taken from Gringotts and guarded with layered protections. A stone hidden behind a corridor that refused children. And Quirrell, Professor Quirrell, always hovering on the edge of things, smelling of garlic and sweat, eyes darting as if he couldn't stand to be watched. Harry's scar gave a warning pulse at the thought of Quirrell. Not because Quirrell was powerful. Because Quirrell felt hollow. Like a person-shaped doorway. Harry swallowed. Why would someone want it? Ron looked at him like he was slow. To live forever. Hermione nodded sharply. Or to come back. Harry's stomach twisted. The Merlin echo whispered, quiet as a blade sliding from a sheath. Immortality without oath becomes hunger. Harry didn't know why the thought came, but it tasted like truth. And suddenly, the iron door in the mirror's vision felt closer. The night Harry made his first oath. It started as a simple mistake. Ron had gotten hold of a set of enchanted chess pieces someone's older brother had passed down, and they'd set them up in an empty classroom near the charms corridor because Ron wanted to prove Hermione couldn't beat him, even with all her books. Hermione had scoffed. Chess isn't in books, Ronald. Ron grinned. Exactly. Harry had sat at the window, half watching their game. Half watching the shadows in the corridor. He couldn't help it. Hogwarts at night still felt like a listening thing. Hermione won in 12 minutes, and Ron accused her of cheating via secret Ravenclaw mind tricks. They laughed quietly, and for a moment Harry felt almost normal. Then the air changed. Not the castle shifting. Not a staircase moving. A presence. Harry's scar warmed. Then flared sharply, like a sudden match struck in his skull. He looked up. Professor Quirrell stood in the doorway. The classroom should have been empty. The corridor should have been quiet. But Quirrell was there, pale face half lit by torchlight, his turban casting odd shadows. His hands trembled slightly. His eyes fixed on Harry. Not Harry's face. Harry's scar. Hermione stiffened. Ron's grin vanished. Professor. Hermione said politely, because Hermione was always polite to authority even when authority was suspicious. Quirrell smiled nervously. Ah. Yes. Well, curfew, he stammered. Students shouldn't be out. His gaze flicked to the window, then back to Harry, like he was fighting to keep it steady. Harry felt it then. The hollowness. Like Quirrell's presence didn't sit right in the room. Like something inside him was pressed up against his skin, listening through the cracks. Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo stirred hard. Door. Host. Passenger. Harry's breathing went shallow. Quirrell stepped in, closing the door behind him. Ron swallowed. We were just go, Quirrell said quickly, waving a hand. Go back. Quickly. Hermione blinked. But, go. Quirrell repeated, voice sharper. Hermione and Ron hesitated, then Ron grabbed Hermione's sleeve and tugged her toward the door, muttering, let's just go before he turns us into frogs. Hermione shot Harry a look, questioning, worried, before she let Ron pull her out. The door clicked shut behind them. Harry was alone, with Quirrell, and the classroom felt suddenly too small. Quirrell's eyes glittered in the torchlight. He licked his lips. You have unusual magic, Quirrell whispered. Harry's scar flared so hard his eyes watered. He stood slowly, keeping the table between them. I don't know what you mean. Quirrell smiled, and it looked wrong on his face. Like the smile belonged to someone else. Oh, you do, Quirrell murmured. You feel the old lines, don't you? The deep wards. The anchor. Harry's stomach dropped. How do you know about that? Harry demanded. Quirrell's gaze flicked toward the ceiling, like he could see through floors and stone into the castle's foundations. I listen, he said softly. And the castle is loud, when it wants to be. Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo rose like a tide behind his eyes, cold and sharp. Threat. Intent. Hunger. Quirrell took a step forward, hands still trembling, but his voice steadier now, like something inside him had taken the reins. I wondered, Quirrell said, if you could open what refuses others. Harry's mouth went dry. I'm not opening anything for you. Quirrell sighed, almost disappointed. No. Then his gaze sharpened, predatory. Then perhaps, he whispered, I will simply see what you are. The torch flames in the brackets flickered. Not from wind, from pressure. Quirrell lifted his wand. Harry's own wand snapped into his hand without thought. And for a heartbeat, the room became a boundary, 2 points of intent drawing a line between them. Quirrell's wand twitched. Harry's scar screamed. A rush of cold power surged up Harry's spine, faster than thought, older than fear. The Merlin echo didn't whisper now. It commanded, claim the space, deny harm, rewrite the rule. Harry felt the room's edges sharpen. The air thickened. The floor beneath his feet seemed to answer. The boundary around him flared into being, cleaner, stronger than it had ever been at Privet Drive. Quirrell's eyes widened. For the first time, his smile faltered. Because he could feel it too. The room had rules now. And Harry was writing them. But the power rising in Harry wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It wanted to solve the problem the way fire solved paper. It wanted to end Quirrell. End the threat. End the door with a passenger. Harry's hands shook. He could feel how easy it would be. One twist of intent. One denial of breath. One quiet law. Stop. His scar burned like a brand. The mirror flashed in his mind. The round table. The sword. The older self raising a warning hand. Do not wake it alone. Harry realized, in a flash of terror, what it could mean. Not the thing under the castle. The thing in him. If he killed now, if he let ancient power solve his fear with a neat, final answer, then he'd be stepping toward the table for the wrong reason. Not duty. Not protection. Control. And control was the seed of tyranny, no matter how noble it pretended to be. Harry's breath hitched. The power in him surged, impatient. Quirrell's wand arm strained as if he was fighting against invisible resistance. You can't, Quirrell hissed, voice splitting strangely, like two tones overlapping. You can't hold me. Harry's wand trembled in his grip. He couldn't outduel an adult. He couldn't outspell a teacher. But he could do something else. He could bind himself. He could choose a rule. The Merlin echo whispered, urgent, sharp. Oath is limiter. Limiter is key. Harry's heart hammered so hard it hurt. Then, with every ounce of will he had, Harry spoke into the thickened air, into the boundary he'd half formed, into the listening castle itself. I swear, Harry said, voice shaking but clear, I will not kill to save myself. The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. The room answered. Harry felt it, something locking into place around his magic, not as a cage, but as a framework. The surge didn't vanish. It changed. It cooled from wildfire into steel. Quirrell's eyes widened in sudden, sharp fear. Because the boundary didn't become weaker. It became cleaner. More precise. No killing. But denial. Containment. Yes. Harry lifted his wand, not to strike Quirrell, but to speak a rule the room could hold. You don't cross, Harry whispered. And the boundary snapped tight. Quirrell slammed into it as if he'd hit glass. He stumbled back, gasping, wand hand shaking violently. For a heartbeat, Harry saw it, behind Quirrell's eyes, a flicker of something ancient and hungry, pressing forward like darkness behind an iron door. Quirrell snarled, not in his own voice. Then he turned sharply and fled, wrenching the door open and disappearing into the corridor like a man running from a fire he couldn't put out. The moment he was gone, Harry's boundary collapsed. Not because it failed, because the oath demanded a cost. Pain lanced behind Harry's eyes. His knees buckled. He caught himself on the table, breathing hard, sweat cold on his skin. His scar throbbed, furious and hot, then slowly cooled. The Merlin echo settled, satisfied and wary. Good. Now power has a spine. Harry swallowed, shaking. He didn't feel victorious. He felt bound. Like he had just signed his name on a contract he didn't fully understand. But he also felt something else, faint and steady beneath the fear. For the first time, his power had a limit chosen by him. Not by Vernon, not by Dumbledore, not by the past inside his bones. By Harry. He made it back to Ravenclaw Tower on instinct and stubbornness. Hermione and Ron were waiting, exactly where Harry knew they would be, faces tight with worry. Eyes snapping to him the moment he stepped through the door. Hermione rushed him. Harry, where were you? She stopped when she saw his face. Ron's voice went small. What happened? Harry swallowed. His throat felt raw. Quirrell, he said quietly. Hermione went pale. Professor Quirrell. Harry nodded. He knows about the anchor. Ron stared. How would he? Harry's scar warmed faintly at the memory of the wrongness behind Quirrell's eyes. I don't think it's just Quirrell, Harry said. Hermione's breath caught. What do you mean? Harry looked at them, really looked. At Hermione's fierce intelligence. At Ron's stubborn loyalty. At the fact that they were here, with him, even when the world got strange. He couldn't tell them everything. Not yet. But he could tell them the part that mattered most. I made an oath, Harry said. Hermione's eyes widened. An oath. Harry nodded slowly. I said I won't kill to save myself. Ron blinked. That's oddly specific. Hermione stared at Harry like he'd just invented a new spell. Harry, an oath like that, if your magic heard it, if the castle heard it. Harry's scar pulsed once. Yes, the Merlin echo whispered. It heard. Hermione's voice shook. That means it's binding. That means it will matter. Harry's hands trembled. He curled them into fists to hide it. It had to, he said hoarsely. Because if I didn't, I think I would've. He stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Ron's face tightened. Hermione's eyes filled with something that wasn't fear of Harry, fear for him. Hermione reached out, grabbed his sleeve again like she was anchoring him to the present. We'll figure it out, she said fiercely. But you are not dealing with a teacher alone. Ever. Ron nodded hard, swallowing. Yeah, next time we bring a bat. Or a bigger friend. Or Hagrid. Harry almost laughed, but it came out as a shaky breath. He looked down at Hermione's hand on his sleeve. And he realized something that chilled him more than Quirrell's hollow eyes. The oath he'd made wasn't just a promise. It was a key, a structure, a way to unlock power safely. And if Harry could do that, then someone else could, too. Someone hungrier. Someone older. Someone who would gladly make an oath that allowed anything. Harry's scar pulsed once, cold and sharp. From beneath the castle, the steady heartbeat continued. And now, in the dark, it felt less like a sleeping giant. And more like something that had just noticed Harry had learned how to build locks. Harry tried to pretend it was over. After Quirrell fled that night, Hogwarts returned to its usual rhythm. Classes, homework, laughter in corridors, Ron's dramatic hatred of essays, Hermione's triumph. Whenever she found an obscure footnote that proved she was right, which was always. But Harry couldn't unfeel what he'd felt. Quirrell hadn't been a teacher with bad nerves. He'd been a door. Something hungry had been standing behind that door, listening through the cracks. Worse, Quirrell had used one word like a knife. Anchor. Harry began noticing the anchor everywhere once he knew what to listen for. It wasn't a single object in a single place. It was a pulse braided into multiple ward lines, like a heart pumping power through a body. And every time Harry walked near the third-floor corridor, his scar warmed with the same old warning. Lock. It wasn't curiosity that kept him awake now. It was the sense that someone else had already decided to open it. The warning came 3 days before exams. They were leaving the library at dusk, Hermione muttering about revision schedules, Ron groaning about how the schedules were a form of cruelty and should be outlawed, when RRY stopped so suddenly Hermione nearly walked into him. His scar had flared, not a steady warmth, a sharp, stabbing spike. Harry's hand went to his forehead automatically. Hermione's voice cut off mid-sentence. Harry. Harry didn't answer. He was looking down the corridor. Professor Snape was walking briskly away, black robe snapping like a banner. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the way his posture was rigid with urgency, and the way his hand kept straying toward his left sleeve as if something under it itched. Ron squinted. Snape looks like he swallowed a lemon. Hermione frowned. He always looks like that. Harry's scar pulsed again, and beneath the pulse came something colder, an instinct with teeth. Movement. Pressure. A seal being tested. Harry swallowed. Someone's going to the corridor. Hermione's eyes widened. How do you know? I can feel it, Harry whispered. Ron rolled his eyes. You can feel everything. Harry didn't smile. His gaze stayed on the direction Snape had gone. And the Merlin echo in his bones murmured, quiet and absolute. If the lock is tested, the key must decide what it is. Harry's mouth went dry. He turned to Hermione and Ron. We're going, he said. Ron stared. We're going where? Harry's scar burned. Hermione seemed to understand before he finished the sentence. Her face went pale. No, she whispered. Harry nodded once. Yes. Ron's eyes widened slowly. Oh, That corridor. Hermione grabbed Harry's sleeve, harder than usual. Harry, Snape is a professor. Quirrell is a professor. There are wards, there's a monster behind the door. I know, Harry said, voice tight. That's why we're going. Hermione's grip tightened. We can tell a teacher. Harry laughed once, short and humorless. Which one? Hermione went very still. Ron swallowed. This is mad. Harry looked at them both. I'm not asking you to follow me, he said quietly. But I'm going. Ron opened his mouth. Then, to Harry's surprise, Ron shut it again and nodded, jaw set. Right, he said hoarsely. Then you're not going alone. Hermione's eyes flickered, fear, frustration, determination, then she let out a sharp breath. Fine, she whispered, but we do it properly. We think first. We plan. Harry's scar warmed, approval, steady and calm. Good. A builder does not run at a wall. He studies the hinges. They waited until the castle quieted. Curfew passed. Portraits dozed. The footsteps in the corridors thinned until Hogwarts felt like a sleeping beast, breathing slow and deep. Harry led them through short cuts Hermione had found and Ron had tested. They moved like thieves, cloaks pulled tight, wands ready, hearts hammering. When they reached the third-floor corridor, the air hit them like a wall. Not the invisible barrier from before, this was stronger now, tighter, like the ward had tensed its muscles. Hermione hissed softly. It's reinforced. Ron whispered, that's encouraging. Harry stepped close, not touching the stone this time. He didn't need to. The ward lines were loud now, humming with recent adjustments. Someone had been here. Someone had argued with the lock. Harry's scar burned. And then, faintly, Harry heard something else. A low growl from behind the door. Not anger. Warning. Like a guard dog reminding the world it still had teeth. Ron's voice came out thin. We're not opening that. Harry nodded. We're not opening it, he agreed. Hermione blinked. Then what? Harry pointed. Not at the door. At the section of floor beside it where the stones looked slightly wrong. Not cracked. Not damaged. Just older. As if those particular stones had been lifted and set back down many times. Hermione's breath hitched. A trapdoor. Ron stared. How in Merlin's name did you? Harry's scar warmed sharply at the name. Hermione shot Ron a look. Don't say things like that here. Ron opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it and shut it again. Harry crouched, heart pounding. And finally let his fingertips hover above the stone. He didn't touch. He listened. The Merlin echo rose like a tide behind his eyes. Permission is not forced. It is acquired. Harry whispered, barely audible, I'm not here to take. I'm here to stop harm. The air shifted, not opening, not welcoming, but acknowledging. The ward's pressure eased by the smallest fraction, enough that Harry knew it had hurt his terms. His scar burned, and he felt the cost waiting like a blade held just out of sight. Harry swallowed. On three, he whispered. Hermione nodded, lips pressed tight. Ron's hand shook slightly on his wand. 1, Harry breathed. 2, 3. They lifted. The trapdoor opened with a soft groan of hinges. And the air beneath it breathed out, cold and old. Ron leaned over and peered down. Then recoiled. Oh no. Absolutely not. Hermione's eyes were wide. Devil's snare. Harry looked down into writhing darkness, vines coiling like living ropes. The Merlin echo whispered, calm and cruelly practical. The first defense is fear. If you panic, you feed it. Harry swallowed. We jump, he said. Ron stared. What? Harry met his eyes. If we hesitate, we lose time. If someone else is already down there. Hermione's face tightened. She understood. Ron looked like he wanted to argue. Then he exhaled, jaw set. Fine, but if I die, I'm haunting you. Harry almost smiled. Deal. They dropped. The devil's snare caught them instantly, vines wrapping Harry's legs, tightening around his chest, squeezing like a giant fist. Hermione gasped as it coiled around her, panic flickering in her eyes. Don't fight it. Harry strained, voice harsh. Relax, relax. Ron swore loudly as a vine clamped around his ankle. Hermione forced herself to stop thrashing. Light, she choked. It hates light. I know, Harry hissed. But instead of casting fire wildly, Harry did something else. He felt the vines as a kind of boundary, a living ward that obeyed a rule. Struggle means prey. Stillness means uncertainty. Harry steadied his breathing, ignored the crushing pressure, and spoke a law into the dark. Release what is not resisting. The Merlin echo surged. For a heartbeat, the vines hesitated, confused, like a creature hearing a command in its oldest language. Then, slowly, the coils loosened. Not all at once, not freely, but enough. Hermione sucked in air, eyes wide with shock. Ron stared at Harry like Harry had grown another head. Since when can you talk to plants? Harry's scar pulsed painfully. The cost bit down. His vision swam, but he forced himself upright, and hissed, "Move. Now." Hermione lit her wand with a bright burst of light. The devil's snare recoiled, shrinking away from them like it was offended. They ran. The next chamber was full of fluttering wings. Keys, hundreds of them, whirled in the air like a swarm, glittering in torchlight. A broomstick rack sat against the wall. Ron looked relieved. "Oh, this one's easy." Hermione narrowed her eyes. "Nothing is easy." Harry stepped forward, scar warming. This wasn't just a puzzle. It was a series of tests, each one a conversation with the castle's idea of protection. Harry could feel the questions embedded in them. Are you brave? Are you clever? Are you loyal? Are you patient? Will you use violence first? Harry swallowed and reached for a broomstick. The keys whirled faster, as if laughing. Hermione's gaze flicked over the flock, searching for something specific. "There," she whispered. "One key's wing is bent." Ron squinted. "How can you?" "Because I have eyes," Hermione snapped. Harry mounted the broom and kicked off the ground. The air rushed past his face as he shot upward. The keys scattered, darting like fish. Harry's scar throbbed. The Merlin echo whispered, "You cannot catch what does not agree to be caught. But you can offer terms." Harry didn't shout an incantation. He didn't fire a spell. He spoke softly into the air, as if speaking to a living system. "I'm not here to steal," he murmured. "Only to stop what's coming." The bent-wing key hesitated. Just a fraction. As if, listening. Harry's heart hammered. He dove. His fingers closed around cold metal. The key struggled once, then went still, like it had accepted his claim. Harry landed hard, slid on stone, and tossed it to Hermione. Hermione caught it with shaking hands. She stared at Harry, breathless. It stopped. Harry wiped sweat from his forehead. It listened. Ron muttered, "I hate listening objects." They unlocked the next door and stepped through. The chessboard waited. Black and white tiles stretched across the floor, pieces as tall as Ron. Hermione's face went pale. "Oh." Ron's eyes widened, then lit with a strange, fierce determination. Finally, he whispered, like he'd been waiting for this his whole life. Harry's scar warmed faintly. Not warning. Respect. Ron stepped onto the board. And the pieces turned their stone heads as one. A deep voice rumbled from somewhere in the chamber, like the castle itself speaking through granite. "Play." Ron swallowed, then squared his shoulders. "Right," he muttered. "I'm the knight." Hermione grabbed his sleeve. "Ron." Ron shook his head. "Someone has to." Harry's throat tightened. He didn't want this. He didn't want to trade friends for progress like a sacrifice. The Merlin echo whispered, cold and certain. "This is why oaths exist. So you remember what you refuse." Harry's hands clenched. "I won't let you die," Harry said, voice low. Ron looked at him, startled by the intensity. Then he managed a shaky grin. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't be noble. Just win." The game began. Pieces moved with crushing weight. Stone slammed stone. The echoes shook dust from the ceiling. Ron shouted commands, sweat on his brow, eyes sharp with focus. Hermione watched, hands trembling, calculating with him. Harry stood at the edge of the board. Scar burning, not because the chess was ancient, but because of the intent behind it. The castle wasn't trying to kill them. It was trying to decide if they deserved the next door. Ron made a final move. A sacrifice. The enemy queen swung down. Stone smashed. Ron was thrown from his square like a rag doll. He hit the floor with a sickening thud. "Ron!" Hermione screamed. Harry's vision went red. The surge rose in him, wild, furious, an old power eager to solve grief with violence. The Merlin echo pushed up hard. Break the board. Crush the system. Punish the maker. Harry's scar burned like fire. And then, the oath. "I will not kill to save myself." The words echoed in his bones like a spine holding him upright. Harry clenched his jaw until it hurt, forced the surge down into something cleaner. He dropped beside Ron, hands shaking. Ron's eyes fluttered open. He coughed. Did we win? Hermione sobbed. You idiot. Ron's mouth twitched. Take him, go. Harry's throat tightened. He looked at Ron, really looked, and felt something heavy settle in his chest. A promise he didn't speak aloud yet. Not an oath, but close. We're coming back, Harry whispered. Ron blinked slowly. Yeah, course you are. Harry grabbed Hermione's hand. Go, Ron rasped. Before I start crying and it gets embarrassing. Hermione made a broken sound, then nodded fiercely. They ran. The next room smelled of smoke and sharp chemicals. A table stood in the center with bottles arranged like a riddle. Hermione stopped dead. Harry's scar warmed faintly, but this wasn't his kind of magic. This was logic. Hermione's. She stepped forward, eyes scanning labels, mouth moving silently. Harry watched her, breathing hard, sweat cold on his skin. His head still ached from the chess room. Hermione's hands shook, but her mind didn't. After a long moment, she grabbed 2 bottles. One will take you forward, she whispered. One will take me back to get Ron. Harry's heart lurched. No. Hermione's eyes flashed. Yes. Ron's alone. And you're. She swallowed, voice cracking. You're the one Quirrell wants. You have to stop him. Harry stared at her, chest tight. Hermione thrust the smaller bottle at him. Go, she said fiercely. And Harry. Harry met her eyes. Hermione's voice dropped to a whisper. Don't let them make you a weapon. Harry's scar pulsed. The Merlin echo went quiet, listening. Harry nodded once. Hermione drank her bottle and vanished into the air like she'd been swallowed by fog. Harry drank his. Fire poured through his veins. The room spun. And then, he stepped into the final chamber. It wasn't what he expected. No monster. No roaring beast. Just a room lit by a cold blue flame, and in the center. The mirror arised. Harry's stomach dropped. His scar burned with recognition and dread. The mirror stood there like a judge who remembered him. And in front of it, Professor Quirrell. He turned slowly, face pale. Eyes shining with that wrongness Harry couldn't unsee. He smiled. Harry Potter, Quirrell whispered. Harry's wand snapped up. His scar flared. The Merlin echo rose like an ocean tide. Restrained only by the oath's spine. Quirrell's gaze flicked to the mirror, hungry. Do you know what this is? He asked softly. Harry swallowed. A trap. Quirrell chuckled. A test. A filter. His voice shifted, 2 tones overlapping for a heartbeat. Dumbledore is clever. Harry's skin crawled. Quirrell stepped aside slightly, revealing the mirror's surface. Look, Quirrell whispered. Tell me what you see. Harry's scar burned. The mirror wanted him to look. The room wanted him to look. The old rules under Hogwarts leaned forward like listeners in a courtroom. Harry stared at the mirror. And saw himself. Not with parents. Not with friends. Not with a table. He saw himself holding a small red stone in his hand. The Philosopher's Stone. His reflection smiled faintly. Then, very slowly, his reflection put the stone into his pocket, and walked away. Harry's stomach turned cold. Because in that reflection, Harry didn't look triumphant. He looked relieved. Like someone who had just secured a dangerous thing so no one else could use it. Harry's scar pulsed. The Merlin echo whispered, almost gentle. Wanting to protect is not wanting to possess. The mirror knows the difference. Behind him, Quirrell inhaled sharply. Harry felt it, like a click inside the air. Something shifted in his pocket. A weight that hadn't been there a moment ago. Harry's heart hammered. He had it. Quirrell's eyes widened, feverish. Yes, he breathed. Yes, now give it to me. Harry's wand shook slightly. No. Quirrell's smile twisted. You don't understand, he hissed. With it, I could. His voice cracked, then deepened, and for a heartbeat Harry heard a second voice behind Quirrell's teeth, cold and ancient and starving. Return. Harry's scar screamed. The iron door flashed in his mind. The hungry darkness pressed. Quirrell stepped forward, wand raised. Hand it over. Harry's boundary snapped up instinctively, air thickening, space tightening. Quirrell hit it like he'd hit glass. Stumbling, he snarled, anger bleeding through fear. You think you can stop me? Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo surged. Domain. Claim. Deny. Harry's voice came out steady. Despite his shaking hands. This space is mine, Harry whispered. No harm crosses. The air sharpened. The blue flame crackled higher. Quirrell's face contorted. He pushed against the boundary, trembling with effort. And then he did something that made Harry's blood run cold. Quirrell lowered his wand, and reached out with his bare hand. Toward Harry. Harry's scar exploded with warning. Do not let him touch. Harry stepped back, but Quirrell lunged faster than he should have been able to. His fingers caught Harry's wrist. The moment skin touched skin, pain ripped through Harry like lightning. Not a spell, not a curse, a reaction. Quirrell screamed. His hand blistered instantly, flesh reddening as if burned by fire. He jerked back, eyes wild. Harry stared at his own wrist, panting. His scar burned hot. The Merlin echo whispered, stunned and grim. Old protections. Love made wards. They still hold. Quirrell's face twisted. Your mother, he hissed, voice trembling with rage. Still, in the way. He surged forward again, desperation replacing caution. Harry's boundary flared, but Quirrell shoved through like a man willing to tear his own skin off to reach what he wanted. He grabbed Harry's arm again. The burning intensified. Quirrell screamed louder, collapsing to his knees, smoke rising from his hands. But behind Quirrell's pain, that second presence flared, furious. Hateful, like something pressed against glass that had just found a crack. Harry's scar screamed. The air in the room shuddered. For a heartbeat, the blue flames flic curd, and Harry felt the anchor pulse below the castle, strained, as if the entire defense system was being tested by the violence happening here. The Merlin echo surged hard. This is not only theft. This is pressure on the lock. Harry's breath hitched. So that was it. Voldemort, whatever was inside Quirrell, didn't just want the stone to live. He wanted the stone's anchoring power. He wanted to use it to pry at older bindings. To weaken whatever was sealed beneath Hogwarts. Harry's hands shook. He felt the wild power in him roar, desperate to end the threat by any means. But the oath stood like a pillar. No killing. No easy ending. Harry looked at Quirrell writhing, and made a decision that felt like slamming a door. He didn't attack. He didn't curse. He denied. Harry lifted his wand and spoke, voice raw. You don't get to take this. The boundary snapped tighter, focused not on hurting Quirrell, but on holding the room's rules in place. Quirrell screamed, smoke pouring off his hands. Then, suddenly, Quirrell's body jerked. His head snapped up, and for a heartbeat, Harry saw it. Not Quirrell. Something else, behind his eyes. Red, cold, a presence that felt like a starving crown. It looked at Harry with pure hatred. And spoke through Quirrell's mouth in a voice that wasn't Quirrell's at all. You are not him. Harry's scar burned like fire. The Merlin echo answered without words, an ancient refusal. The presence hissed, furious, and the air in the chamber seemed to collapse inward. Harry's vision swam. The boundary wavered, and then a burst of light exploded from the doorway. Harry. Dumbledore. He stood there like a living ward, eyes blazing with fierce clarity, wand raised. The pressure in the room shifted instantly, Quirrell's PR. Essence recoiling like a shadow thrown back by flame. Quirrell screamed one last time, a sound of rage and loss, then collapsed like his bones had turned to water. Harry's knees buckled. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Dumbledore rushing forward, and the mirror of Arised reflecting Harry's face, pale, trembling. And in his eyes, for a heartbeat, the older calm of someone who had built locks before. When Harry woke, it was to white curtains and the smell of medicinal herbs. The hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey fussed over him like outrage with hands. You, she snapped the moment she saw his eyes open. You are not allowed to go gallivanting into cursed chambers and letting dark wizards grab you. Harry blinked slowly. No excuses, Pomfrey said, shoving something foul-tasting into his hands. Drink. Quote. Harry drank because fighting Pomfrey felt like fighting gravity. When she finally stormed away, muttering about reckless boys and headmasters with no sense, Harry turned his head. Dumbledore sat beside his bed. No twinkle. Just tired, old eyes. Harry's scar pulsed faintly, not warning this time, but tension like a question waiting to be answered. Dumbledore spoke first. You showed remarkable restraint, he said quietly. Harry swallowed. I didn't kill him. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. You did not. Harry's hands clenched under the blanket. That wasn't Quirrell, he whispered. Not all of him. Dumbledore didn't deny it. Silence stretched. Then Harry forced the words out, voice shaking. He was using the stone to push at something else. The anchor. The lock under the school. Dumbledore went very still. The air felt colder. Harry's scar burned. Dumbledore's voice dropped, careful as stepping near a cliff edge. You felt that? Harry nodded. Dumbledore watched him for a long moment, then sighed. The stone is safe, Dumbledore said. It will be destroyed. Harry's heart lurched. Destroyed. Dumbledore's mouth tightened. It is too tempting a thing to exist. Harry's scar pulsed. The Merlin echo whispered, approving. Good. Remove the lever. Protect the lock. Dumbledore looked at Harry like he was seeing him from a new angle. Tell me, Dumbledore said softly, when you were in that chamber, what did the mirror show you? Harry's stomach tightened. He could lie. He could hide it. But he was tired. And he was done being treated like a piece on someone else's board. It showed me taking the stone, Harry said quietly, so no one else could. Dumbledore's eyes softened, almost sad. Yes, he murmured. That is why you received it. Harry stared at him. You put it there. Dumbledore nodded once. As a final barrier. Harry's hands clenched. You used me. Dumbledore's face tightened. I used the truth of you. He said gently. And I regret that you had to carry it. Harry's scar warmed with a cold, bitter understanding. The Merlin echo whispered. Even good men use tools. The question is whether they admit it. Harry swallowed hard. He said. Harry's voice caught. He said I'm not him. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. Who? Harry's scar burned. The memory of that red, hateful presence made his skin crawl. I don't know, Harry whispered. But he looked at me like he recognized something, and hated it. Dumbledore's fingers tightened on the arm of his chair. For a heartbeat, Harry saw it, real fear. Naked and old, in the headmaster's eyes. Then it vanished behind calm. Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. Harry, he said very quietly, there are names in this world that carry, weight. History. Binding. Harry's scar pulsed like a warning bell. Dumbledore's voice remained careful. If you ever begin to hear one of those names, if the castle begins to whisper it to you, do not answer alone. Harry's mouth went dry. He thought of the hidden ink. Emrys awakens. Camelot watches. He thought of the sorting hat whispering the name like a key. He thought of the mirror's reflection. Harry stared at Dumbledore. So you do know. Dumbledore's gaze held his. I know enough, Dumbledore said, to be afraid of repeating old stories. Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo whispered. Quiet and relentless. Old stories repeat when people refuse to learn the rules beneath them. Harry lay back, exhausted. Dumbledore rose. As he turned to leave, Harry's scar pulsed once, cold and sharp. Not from Dumbledore. From below the castle. From the lock. A faint vibration ran through the bedframe, through the stone floor, through Harry's bones. And in the quiet after Dumbledore's footsteps faded, Harry heard it, so soft it might have been imagination, except his scar burned in recognition. A whisper in the pipes. A voice like scales sliding over stone. Not a memory. Not the Merlin echo. Something else. Something waiting. Air. Harry's breath caught. His fingers tightened in the sheets. And far beneath Hogwarts, something old shifted again, patient. Listening, like it had just learned the key was awake and learning to build locks on purpose. The first night back at Privet Drive, Harry woke up choking on a word. Not his word. A word. That tasted like stone dust and old iron. Air. He sat bolt upright in the cupboard under the stairs that was no longer a cupboard. Vernon had moved him to Dudley's second bedroom after the letter incident. As if walls could erase what had happened, heart hammering, sweat cold on his neck. His scar wasn't throbbing the way it did near ancient wards. It was, listening, like it could hear Omething far away speaking in a voice that wasn't meant for human ears. Harry pressed his palm to his forehead. The Merlin echo inside him was awake enough to murmur, but it wasn't the source of the word. It sounded wary, almost displeased. Not mine, not yours. Something calling through cracks. Harry swallowed. The cracks. The lock under Hogwarts. The thing behind the iron door he'd seen in the mirror. He had survived his first year. He had made an oath that gave his power a spine. He had watched Dumbledore destroy the lever that was the stone. He should have felt safer. Instead, the world felt like it had decided Harry Potter was now officially part of its older conversations. And old conversations never stayed quiet for long. It was a few days later, on a humid summer evening. When the Dursleys were pretending Harry didn't exist, that the second warning arrived. Not in a letter. In a person. Harry was sitting on the bed with a library book, a normal one, from the Muggle library. Because Hermione had written him 3 letters and included a list of acceptable non-magical reading, like she was managing his education personally when the air in the room shifted. The boundary around him, his quiet, invisible rule that kept hands from striking, tightened the way it did before something crossed a threshold. Harry's scar warmed. Then the wardrobe door creaked open. Not pushed. Not pulled. Opened as if it had decided it was time. A small figure stepped out of the dark space inside like darkness had a servant. Large eyes. Thin limbs. Bat-like ears. A pillowcase for clothes. Harry's breath caught. The creature looked at him as if Harry was both hope and disaster. "Harry Potter," it squeaked. Harry didn't reach for his wand. He didn't shout. He simply stared. Because the moment the creature spoke his name, hidden ink stirred in Harry's mind the way it did near ancient wards. Not letters, concepts. Bound servant. Old oath. House magic. The elf trembled, clasping its hands. "Dobby has come to warn Harry Potter," it said miserably, as if the words hurt to say. Harry Potter must not go back. Harry Potter must not return to Hogwarts. Harry's stomach tightened. Why? Dobby flinched at the question like it might strike him. "Bad things," Dobby whispered. "Terrible things. Dobby cannot say. Dobby's mouth, Dobby's hands, Dobby's magic." He slapped himself hard across the face. Twice, as if punishment could erase the urge to speak. Harry shot off the bed. "Stop that." The boundary around Harry flared, soft but firm. Dobby's hand froze mid-air like it had hit glass. The elf's eyes widened in shock. Harry swallowed. "Who told you to come?" Dobby's lips trembled. "Dobby cannot." Harry's scar warmed, and the Merlin echo rose like a steady hand on his shoulder. "Ask the rule, not the secret." Harry tried again, more careful. "Is it about a lock?" Dobby went very still. The elf's pupils widened until his eyes looked almost black. And in the silence, Harry felt it, a deep thread connecting the elf to some unseen master, an oath chained so tight it made Harry's skin itch. Dobby whispered, voice barely audible, "There is a door at Hogwarts." Harry's scar burned. Dobby slapped himself again, but the boundary caught his wrist gently and stopped it. Tears spilled down Dobby's face. "Dobby is sorry," Dobby sobbed. "Dobby is trying. But if Dobby says too much." He made a strangled sound and punched his own head against the wardrobe. Harry lunged forward. "Dobby." But the elf vanished with a crack like a snapped bone. The air popped back into place. Harry stood trembling in the suddenly ordinary room, breathing hard. On his bedside table, a single sock lay neatly folded, one he hadn't owned a minute ago. A gift. An apology. A clue. Harry's scar pulsed once, cold and exact. Someone inside the castle is moving. And the bound servants are afraid to speak. Harry decided to go back anyway. Because fear didn't get to make his choices. Not anymore. Vernon tried to stop him, of course. Tried to lock his trunk away, tried to block the door, tried to shout and threaten and spit the word, freak, like it tasted good. But the boundary made Vernon's rage feel useless, like a fist-punching fog. And when the letters arrived, this time fewer, calmer, as if Hogwarts had learned it didn't need to scream to be heard, Vernon didn't even rip them. Petunia watched Harry pack with the expression of someone watching a storm walk back out to sea. She didn't say goodbye. But when Harry passed her in the hallway, she whispered. So quietly it might have been meant for her own guilt. "Be careful of old families. They don't like loose ends." Harry's scar warmed faintly, not in agreement, but in recognition. Bargains. Clauses. Always. King's Cross was loud and normal and full of people who had no idea the world had secret doors hidden inside it. Harry found Ron and Hermione near the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, Hermione talking rapidly, Ron looking like he was trying to survive her words. "Harry." Hermione burst, grabbing his arm like she needed to confirm he was real. "Did you get my letter? And the list? And the second list? And I got them," Harry said, and he meant it. Ron grinned. "Mate, you look taller." Harry snorted. "You look like you lost a fight with your hair." Ron shoved him lightly, relieved. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then they tried to run through the barrier. And slammed into it. Hard. Ron staggered back, swearing. Hermione yelped, rubbing her shoulder. Harry stepped forward slowly, hand hovering near the bricks. His scar had gone hot. Not warning hot. Alarm hot. The barrier wasn't refusing them like the third-floor corridor had. It was locked. Forcefully. Artificially. Hermione's voice went sharp. That's not normal. The barrier shouldn't. Ron rubbed his nose. I think it hates us. Harry didn't touch the wall. He listened. The barrier had a rule written into it, newer than the castle's old ward lines. Crude, forceful, like someone had jammed a knife into the mechanism. No entry. No passage. No return. Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo whispered. Someone is trying to isolate you. A gate locked can become a trap. Ron looked around nervously. So what, do we just miss school? Hermione looked horrified. Absolutely not. Harry's gaze flicked to the edge of the platform, to the tracks stretching out into distance. A thought rose in him, not a memory, not a whisper, just a simple builder's logic. If the door won't open, use another route. Ron followed his gaze and went pale. No. Harry smiled faintly. Yes. They flew. Ron's father's car rose off the ground like it was doing something illegal and thrilled about it. London shrank beneath them. Clouds licked the windows. Hermione screamed once, then clamped her mouth shut with fierce dignity as if refusing to give Ron the satisfaction. Harry watched the land scroll beneath them and felt something subtle and wrong, like a thread tightening. As the train tracks curved toward the north, Harry's scar began to pulse in time with them. Not with Hogwarts, with something beneath Hogwarts. The closer they got, the more the heartbeat returned, steady and deep. And threaded through that heartbeat was another sound, faint as a whisper in stone pipes. Air. Harry's fingers curled around the seat. He didn't tell Ron and Hermione. Not yet. He didn't want to turn their faces into the same tight fear he felt. The car shuddered as it approached the castle grounds. The heartbeat beneath the earth grew stronger. Then the car jerked violently. The steering wheel fought Ron like it was possessed. Ron swore. Why is it? The car shot sideways and slammed into something solid. A tree. Branches whipped. Metal screamed. The world spun. Then everything stopped with a sickening crunch. Harry's head snapped forward. Pain flashed behind his eyes. Hermione groaned. Ron let out a choked sound. The whomping willow thrashed angrily, branches swinging like clubs, battering the car as if it took offense at being approached. Harry's scar burned. Punishment. A gate denied. A route forced. A boundary broken. They crawled out battered and bruised and furious, and Harry felt Hogwarts' attention settle on him like a stare. Not the teachers. The castle. Like it had witnessed his arrival through an improper door and was quietly unimpressed. By the time Harry limped into the Great Hall for the start of term feast, whispers were already chasing him like gnats. The boy who lived crashed a flying car. Did you see his forehead? His scar glowed for a second. McGonagall looked like she wanted to murder him. Harry barely heard them, because the moment he stepped inside, his scar flared. Not at the ceiling, not at the candles, at the walls. There was something moving in them. Not physically, no bulge in the stone. But Ari could feel a presence sliding through the castle's hidden spaces like water in pipes. The Merlin echo stirred, uneasy. Not a ghost, not a portrait, something that uses the in-between. Harry swallowed. Hermione noticed his stillness immediately. Harry forced himself to sit. Nothing, he lied. Ron nudged him. Mate, your nothing is always terrifying. The feast began. Dumbledore made a speech. Lockhart preened and smiled like a man who had never met shame. The older students cheered. The younger ones stared. Harry tried to breathe, tried to enjoy food that didn't taste like fear. But the walls kept whispering. Not words he understood. Not yet. Just the sensation of a tongue that wasn't human scraping syllables through stone. The first attack happened the night before Halloween. Harry had been leaving the library with Hermione, Ron trailing behind with a stack of books he claimed were self-defense against homework, when Harry stopped. His scar had gone cold. A cold so sharp it made his teeth ache. Hermione nearly collided with him. Harry, what is it? Harry's eyes fixed on the air. Because for the first time, the whisper in the walls formed into something his mind could hold. It wasn't English, but it slid into meaning anyway, like a blade finding a sheath. Move, hunt, kill. Hermione's face went pale at Harry's expression. Harry. Ron frowned. You look like you've seen a Dementor. Harry's throat tightened. Did you hear that? Hermione shook her head quickly. Hear what? Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo whispered, grim and steady. Root language. Command. Not spoken for you. Spoken at you. Harry swallowed hard. The voice came again, closer now, sliding through stone like a serpent through grass. Smell. Blood. Air. Harry's stomach dropped. He turned sharply toward the corridor. And ran. Hermione shouted his name and ran after him. Ron followed, swearing loudly. They rounded a corner. And found it. A cat hung stiff as a board from a torch bracket, eyes wide and glassy. Filch's cat. Mrs. Norris. Beneath her, written in dark red across the stone wall, were words that made the air in Harry's lungs freeze. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Hermione made a choking sound. Ron went pale. What does that mean? Harry stared at the words, scar burning hot and cold at once. Not because of the threat. Because the phrase enemies of the air tugged on something ancient inside him, something that recognized the structure of the warning the way you recognized an old song. Claim. Inheritance. Permission. The Merlin echo whispered, controlled and sharp. This is not random violence. This is ritual. A door being announced. Footsteps thundered behind them. Students gathered. Faces turned. Whispers erupted like sparks. Filch shoved through, saw his cat, and screamed. You! He shrieked, pointing at Harry. You did it. Harry stepped back, heart hammering. He didn't care about Filch's accusation. He cared about the voice in the walls that only he could hear. Because it had spoken a word again. Soft as a promise. Hard as a knife. Air. And this time, Harry understood something that made his blood run colder than the petrified cat. The voice wasn't calling him air. It was calling someone else. Someone who was using an ancient language, older than Hogwarts. Older than spells, to issue commands like laws. Harry's scar pulsed in warning. The Merlin echo rose, suddenly fully awake, and for the first time it sounded afraid of something that wasn't itself. That tongue can bind minds. If you answer it, you become part of its contract. Harry swallowed, staring at the blood-red message. Professor McGonagall arrived, face like thunder. Snape's eyes gleamed with cold satisfaction. Dumbledore's gaze snapped to Harry, sharp, measuring, and suddenly very, very alert. Harry stood in the center of a circle of accusation and fear. And through it all, the voice in the stone whispered one last time, closer than ever, sliding behind Harry's eyes like a threat meant only for him. You will open it. Harry's breath caught. Because the most terrifying part was, some deep part of his magic understood exactly what the voice meant. Not with fear, with mechanics, with the cruel clarity of a builder recognizing a lock. They didn't let Harry leave the corridor. Not at first. Professor McGonagall marched in like a storm given human form, took one look at Mrs. Norris hanging stiff as a board, and snapped her wand up so fast the air seemed to flinch. Filch was sobbing now, loud, ugly sobs, clutching his face like grief had claws. You murdered her. He howled at Harry. You did this. I didn't. Harry shouted back, and the words tasted like panic because the crowd wanted a villain and villains were easier than mystery. Students pressed close. Faces stretched with curiosity and fear. Enemies of the air. Chamber of Secrets. Potter was right there. Hermione grabbed Harry's arm hard, like she was anchoring him to the present. Ron stood on Harry's other side, shoulders squared, jaw clenched like a boy trying to look bigger than his fear. McGonagall's eyes swept the wall, the message, the petrified cat. Her gaze lingered on the red letters a heartbeat too long. Then she inhaled, sharp and controlled. This corridor is to be cleared, she said, voice cutting through the whispers. Now. The crowd hesitated. Snape arrived like an omen, black robes flowing. His eyes slid to Harry with cold satisfaction. How very theatrical, Snape drawled. And how very convenient. Harry's scar warmed, tension tightening like wire. Dumbledore appeared behind Snape, quiet as falling ash. The great howl. L didn't hush when Dumbledore entered this time. It held its breath. Dumbledore looked at Mrs. Norris, looked at Filch, looked at the message. Then his gaze landed on Harry and did something Harry hated. It didn't accuse. It didn't comfort. It measured. As if Dumbledore was watching for a second rhythm. As if he was listening for the old thing inside Harry to answer. Harry's scar pulsed once, sharp, warning. Don't speak the wrong language. Dumbledore's voice was gentle but carried like a bell. Mrs. Norris is not dead, he said. She has been petrified. Filch made a broken sound. Dumbledore's eyes turned to McGonagall. Escort the students to their dormitories. No wandering. Not tonight. Snape's lip curled. And what of Potter? Harry felt Hermione's grip tighten. Ron's hand slid closer to his wand. Dumbledore's gaze didn't leave Harry's face. Harry will come with me, Dumbledore said calmly. Harry's stomach dropped. He didn't want to go alone with Dumbledore a quiet room full of questions and careful words. But McGonagall nodded crisply, and the crowd began to disperse, still whispering, still staring. Hermione tried to step forward. Professor. McGonagall cut her off with a look. Miss Granger. Dormitory. Hermione's face tightened. She looked at Harry like she wanted to refuse, then forced herself to nod. Ron muttered, if you do anything to him, at Snape. But Hermione dragged him away before he could finish. Harry walked beside Dumbledore through corridors that suddenly felt narrower. The castle hummed with tension, ward lines tight as drawn bows. They didn't go to Dumbledore's office. They stopped at a small antechamber near an old staircase, quiet, unused, filled with dust motes that floated like tiny watchers. Dumbledore turned and studied Harry. Tell me the truth, Dumbledore said softly. When you saw that message, did you understand it? Harry swallowed. His scar warmed faintly. He chose his words with care. I understood the words, Harry said. Not the meaning. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. And did you hear anything? Harry's throat tightened. The whisper in the walls flashed through his mind again. Move. Hunt. Kill. His scar burned in warning. The Merlin echo murmured, quiet and precise. Leverage. Don't surrender it, but don't lie where lies become chains. Harry breathed in slowly. I felt something, he admitted. Like something moving in the castle. Dumbledore watched him for a long moment, then nodded once as if that matched a fear he already owned. There are stories, Dumbledore said gently, that Hogwarts is built upon older magic. Older than the Founders. Harry's scar pulsed once, agreement, grim. Dumbledore continued, voice careful. And there are stories, of a chamber. Harry's hands clenched. Is it real? Quote. Dumbledore's eyes were very old. Yes. Harry's chest tightened. Then why is it still here? Dumbledore's gaze held his, and for a heartbeat Harry saw the shape of Dumbledore's answer, layers of politics, history, fear, pride. The complicated truth that old problems didn't vanish just because you wished they would. Because, Dumbledore said quietly, own locks are built into the foundation of the world. Removing them is not always simple. Harry heard the cage in the words. Hermione would have called it reasonable caution. Harry, who knew cupboards, heard it as something else. A way of saying, not yet. Not you. Not now. Dumbledore's voice softened. I do not believe you harmed Mrs. Norris. Harry's breath stuttered. You don't. Dumbledore's mouth twitched faintly. If I believed that, Harry, you would not be standing here. Harry didn't know whether that was meant to reassure him. It did not. Dumbledore looked at Harry's scar again. And yet, he said, this is not an ordinary year. Harry's scar warmed, tight, wary. Dumbledore leaned closer. If you hear the castle speak in a way others cannot, come to me. Harry's stomach twisted. And if I do, you'll tell me the truth. Dumbledore's eyes flickered. For the first time, the gentleness faltered. I will tell you what you need, Dumbledore said carefully. Not what you deserve, Harry thought. Not what you ask. What I decide you need. The Merlin echo whispered, cold as iron. Terms not agreed or chains. Harry lifted his chin. Fine, he said, voice tight. But I'm not your tool. Dumbledore's gaze softened with something like regret. No, he said, you are not. Then he stepped back and opened the door. Go, Dumbledore murmured. Sleep if you can. Harry walked away with his scar burning and the feeling that Hogwarts itself was waiting to see which part of him would answer first. The next week turned Hogwarts into a pressure cooker. Students traveled in tight groups. Professors appeared in corridors like ghosts. The castle's laughter faded into a nervous quiet. And the whispers about Harry grew teeth. Ravenclaw stared at him like he was a puzzle that might bite. Hufflepuffs looked torn between sympathy and fear. Gryffindors were loyal but uneasy, like they didn't know whether to hug him or keep a step back. Slytherins were worst. They watched him like they were pleased. Like the message on the wall was a prophecy they'd been hoping would come true. Malfoy started calling him, Herr Potter, with a grin sharp enough to cut. Harry tried to ignore it. Tried to focus on class. But then it happened again. Not a cat this time. A student. Colin Creevey was found rigid as stone, camera clutched in frozen hands, eyes wide as if he'd seen something that broke his mind. Petrified. The castle held its breath. The fear got louder. And the voice in the walls, only Harry could hear it now, clearly, terribly, grew bolder. Smell. Fear. So many eyes. So many to blind. Harry's scar went cold. Hermione noticed immediately. Harry, she whispered, you're doing that thing again. Ron leaned in. What thing? Harry swallowed. Listening. Hermione's eyes sharpened. To what? Harry didn't answer. He couldn't, not in the middle of the great hall where every shadow felt like a spy. So he did the only thing he could do. He grabbed Hermione's wrist under the table, squeezed once, and mouthed. Walls. Hermione went pale. Ron stared between them. Okay. Great. Brilliant. Now the walls are talking. Harry's scar pulsed. The Merlin echo whispered. Grim. Not walls. Pipes. Paths. In between. A serpent does not need a door. A serpent. Harry's stomach dropped. Because he knew what came next before it came. He heard it. One evening. As they hurried through a corridor that smelled faintly damp, Harry froze mid-step. Hermione stopped instantly. Ron nearly slammed into them both. Harry's scar burned. Then the whisper slid out of the stone like a knife drawn slowly from a sheath. Hungry. Hermione's voice came out tight. Harry. Harry's throat went dry. It's close. Ron's eyes widened. What's close? Harry didn't get to answer. A voice shouted down the corridor. Students. Over here. Professor Lockhart stood waving dramatically, golden hair gleaming, as if fear was simply another audience for him. I've arranged a special evening. Lockhart announced, beaming. A dueling club. Because what better way to put minds at ease than a little, controlled excitement? Ron muttered, I can think of 1,000 better ways. Quote. Hermione whispered, a dueling club could actually be useful. Harry didn't care about dueling. His scar was still burning. The whisper in the walls had faded, sliding away, retreating. As if the presence didn't want to be seen. Or didn't want Lockhart. That thought almost made Harry laugh. Almost. The dueling club was held in the great hall with all the subtlety of a festival. A raised platform. Torches burning bright. Students packed close, hungry for anything that wasn't helpless fear. Lockhart strutted onto the stage like he'd been born on it. Beside him, Snape stood with arms folded, expression like he'd rather be anywhere else. Lockhart began a speech about my own extensive dueling experience, which Ron translated into a quiet, vicious whisper, he's going to die first. Quote. Hermione elbowed him sharply. Harry barely listened. His scar was warm in a way it always was when old rules drifted close. Not Hogwarts old. Older. Psalm. Anything in the air had a root language taste to it, like the castle was about to speak in a tongue beneath spells. Lockhart flourished his wand at Snape. Snape disarmed him in one smooth motion and sent him flying off the stage. The students roared with laughter. Lockhart scrambled up, hair slightly less perfect, smile strained. Ah. Yes, well, demonstration. Snape's eyes swept the crowd. When his gaze landed on Harry, his mouth curved in the faintest, cruelest hint of amusement. Like he knew something was coming. Then Lockhart began pairing students. Harry found himself on the platform opposite Draco Malfoy. Malfoy smirked. Come to show your true colors, Potter. Harry's hand tightened on his wand. Hermione's voice rose from below. Harry, be careful. Ron shouted, break his nose. Snape's voice cut like a blade. Wands at the ready. Harry lifted his wand. The Merlin echo stirred, calm and watchful. Modern spellcraft. Simple. Contained. Do not answer with law. Snape's voice snapped. Duel. Malfoy cast first. Serpensortia. A snake exploded from Malfoy's wand, landing on the platform with a heavy thud, coiling and hissing. The crowd shrieked and backed away. Harry's scar burned. And suddenly the hiss wasn't just a sound. It was meaning, not translated word by word. Felt whole, like a law written into air. Threat. Strike. Protect self. Harry's breath caught. He could understand it. Hermione shouted, someone get rid of it. Lockhart waved his wand uselessly, looking like a man who had just realized snakes were real. Snape's eyes gleamed, watching. The snake reared. angling toward a second-year girl frozen near the edge of the platform. Harry moved before he thought. He stepped between them. The snake's tongue flicked. Its body tensed to strike. Harry's scar flared hot, and the root language rose in him, older than incantation, older than wandwork. Command. Terms. Boundary. Harry could have blasted it. Could have burned it. But the Merlin echo whispered sharply. If you answer with violence, you teach fear. Answer with law. Harry didn't raise his wand. He leaned forward slightly and spoke, softly, instinctively, in a lang. UAGE that wasn't English and wasn't taught in any class. A hiss that was not a hiss. A sentence shaped like a rule. Stop, Harry told it. The snake froze mid-strike. Harry's scar burned painful. Why? Cost biting down, because speaking root language wasn't free. It used his mind like a conduit. It demanded clarity. It punished hesitation. Harry swallowed the pain. He spoke again. Don't hurt her. Leave. The snake's body loosened. It lowered its head. Then, incredibly, it slid away from the girl and began to retreat toward the edge of the platform, moving like it had been dismissed. The great hall went silent. Not the uneasy silence of fear. The stunned silence of a crowd realizing something they didn't want to know. Then the whispers erupted. He spoke to it. He's a Parselmouth. That's Slytherin's gift. He's the heir. Ron's face went white. Hermione looked like she'd been punched in the stomach. Harry's scar burned like a brand. On the stage, Lockhart stared at Harry with his mouth open. Snape's expression didn't change, but his eyes glittered, as if he'd just watched a trap close. Harry lowered his hands slowly. His head throbbed. The root language left an aftertaste like metal on his tongue. The Merlin echo whispered, grim. You answered. Now they will decide what your answer means. McGonagall surged forward, voice sharp. Enough. Professor Snape, end this at once. Snape flicked his wand. The snake vanished. But the damage was already done. The crowd stared at Harry like he was no longer a boy. Like he was a symbol. A threat. A prophecy. Harry stepped back, breathing hard. Ron shoved through the students and grabbed Harry's arm, pulling him off the platform. We're leaving, Ron hissed. Now. Hermione followed, face tight with fear and anger and something like betrayal on behalf of the world. They pushed into a corridor and kept walking until the great hall's noise dulled behind them. Only then did Hermione whirl on Harry. Parselmouth, she whispered, as if the word could summon consequences. Harry, how? I didn't know, Harry said hoarsely. I just understood it. Ron looked like he wanted to swear but couldn't find the breath. So the walls. Harry nodded once. Hermione's eyes widened in horror. The voice in the walls is speaking Parseltongue. Harry's scar went cold. Yes, he thought. And it wasn't speaking to him like a friend. It was speaking like a master issuing orders through stone. Ron swallowed. So it thinks you're the heir. Harry's throat tightened. Or it wants me to be. Hermione's hands trembled. Harry, Parseltongue is rare. People associate it with dark magic. With Salazar Slytherin. Harry flinched at the name. Not fear. Recognition. As if the name was a rung in a ladder leading down. The Merlin echo whispered, careful. Names are anchors. Don't step on them blindly. Ron's voice cracked. You're not him. Harry looked at Ron, and for a moment Ron's certainty held him upright. Then the castle spoke again. Not from the walls. From closer. A whisper slid out of a nearby bathroom door like steam escaping a crack. Air. You will open it. Harry's scar burned so hard he nearly doubled over. Hermione grabbed him. Harry. Harry's eyes snapped to the bathroom door. The whisper had come from inside. From pipes. From a place damp and echoing. A place where voices could hide. Harry stepped forward, shaking. He didn't want to answer. But the language was inside him now like a key in a lock, and the lock was calling. Ron grabbed his sleeve. Mate, don't. Harry forced himself to breathe. I'm not answering, he whispered. I'm not making a contract. He backed away. They hurried on, faster now, hearts racing. Behind them, in the bathroom. Something shifted in the pipes with a wet, sliding sound. Harry didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, because of anger. He lay in his bed staring at the canopy, listening to the dormitory's breathing. The Merlin echo was awake. Silent and watchful, like a teacher waiting to see if a student would repeat a mistake. Harry's scar pulsed faintly. He felt the castle's older heartbeat below them. Then came a soft knock at the dormitory door. Harry sat up instantly. The door creaked open, and a small figure slipped inside. Ginny Weasley stood there, pale and shaking, clutching something dark against her chest. Her eyes darted around the room like she expected shadows to grab her. "Ginny," Harry whispered. What are you doing here?" Ginny flinched as if he'd shouted. She swallowed hard. Her voice shook. I think something's wrong with me." Harry's scar warmed sharply. Not warning, recognition. The thing in her hands, an old, black book, felt like an anchor. Not the stone's kind. A different kind. A memory anchor. A parasite dressed as ink. Ginny thrust it at him as if it burned. "This," she whispered. It keeps showing up. I don't remember writing in it. But sometimes my hands, sometimes I wake up and my fingers are stained." Harry stared at the book. The cover had no title. No name. Just darkness, worn at the edges, like it had been held by too many anxious hands. Harry's scar pulsed once, cold, exact. The Merlin echo finally spoke, voice like iron. "This is not a diary. This is a door." Ginny's eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered. "I don't know who to tell." Harry's throat tightened. He didn't want more doors. He didn't want more locks calling his name. But Ginny was shaking like a trapped bird. Harry couldn't pretend he didn't understand what it meant to be trapped. Harry took the book carefully. The moment his fingertips touched the cover, his scar burned, hot, sharp. And the air around the diary seemed to lean in. Like something inside it had just realized it was being held by someone who could hear the oldest language. Harry swallowed. He didn't open it yet. He looked at Ginny and said, softly but firmly, "You did the right thing." Ginny's shoulders sagged with relief so raw it hurt to see. Then she fled, slipping out of the dormitory like a guilty secret. Harry sat alone, diary on his knees. His hands trembled. He opened the cover. Blank pages. All of them blank. Harry stared. A normal book. A harmless book. Except the scar burning on his forehead said it was anything but. The Merlin echo whispered a final warning. "Ink is a contract. If you write, it can write back." Harry's throat went dry. He picked up a quill. And, with the careful precision of someone stepping around a trap, Harry wrote one sentence in the center of the first page. "Who are you?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ink on the page shimmered. Harry's scar flared. Words began to form beneath his question, written by an invisible hand, smooth and elegant, as if the page had been waiting its whole life to answer. "Hello, Harry Potter." Harry's blood went cold. Because the diary hadn't asked who he was. It already knew. And as the words dried, Harry felt it, faint but unmistakable, a presence on the other side of the ink, watching him with patient interest. Like a thing behind glass that had just found a voice to speak through. Harry stared at the words until they stopped looking like ink and started looking like a handprint on glass. "Hello, Harry Potter." The quill trembled in his fingers. His scar burned with that clean, cold feeling he'd come to recognize as recognition without consent, like a ward noticing him and deciding he belonged to an older category than child. He forced himself to breathe. The Merlin echo inside him didn't surge or command. It watched, and in its silence, Harry felt something like an ancient craftsman studying a counterfeit coin. Too smooth, too eager. This is a door that wants to be opened. Harry lowered the quill slowly and wrote again, careful, deliberate. "You know my name. That means you're not a normal diary." The ink shimmered. The page answered almost instantly, like it had been waiting with its mouth already open. "I am not normal. But I am harmless, Harry. I can help you." Harry's stomach tightened. Help. Quirrell had wanted help too, help opening what refused him. Dumbledore wanted to help by deciding what Harry needed. Even the castle helped by pulling him toward doors he didn't want. Help was a word that hid hooks. Harry wrote, "What are you?" The answer appeared in graceful script. "My name is Tom Riddle." Harry's scar flared. Not at the name itself. Tom was a normal name, but at the structure of it. It sat on the page like a mask sitting too perfectly on a face. The Merlin echo murmured, almost amused. "Not the true name. The convenient one." Harry's jaw tightened. He wrote, "If you want to help, tell me what's been petrifying people." There was a pause, only a heartbeat, but Harry felt it. The diary didn't like being asked direct questions that mattered. Then the words flowed. Something ancient. Something hidden. A monster in a place no one wants to admit exists. I can show you. Harry's scar went cold. A monster. A hidden place. A door. The diary wasn't just answering, it was steering. Harry's fingers tightened on the quill until his knuckles went pale. The Merlin echo whispered, calm and cutting. A memory that offers a path is a memory that wants you walking it. Set terms. Harry swallowed. He had learned something last year in the chamber with the mirror. Boundaries mattered. Rules mattered. Intent mattered. And oaths were spines. Harry wrote slowly, each word like a nail driven into wood. Before you show me anything, agree to this, you do not lie to me. The page went still. Harry's scar warmed, then burned, like something pressed against the inside of the diary had suddenly become very alert. A long moment passed. Then the ink began to move again, but slower now, as if each letter cost something. Why would I lie, Harry? Harry didn't answer with anger. He answered with structure. Agree, or we're done. The diary's words hesitated again. Then, as if deciding the concession was worth the chance to get closer, the reply appeared. Very well. I will not lie to you. The moment the sentence finished forming, Harry felt a click, subtle, like a latch settling. Not a magical explosion, not a dramatic flare, just a tightening in the air around the book. A boundary accepted. Harry's scar eased by a fraction. The Merlin echo hummed, approving. Good. Now the door has hinges you can see. Harry wrote. Show me. The ink blurred. Then the page went dark, as if the paper itself had become water. Harry barely had time to gasp before the room fell away. He was standing in a corridor. Not Hogwarts corridor exactly, not the present one. Everything was cleaner, newer. The torches were brighter. The stone looked less worn. A memory, Harry realized. A preserved slice of time. He looked down at himself. He was still himself. Still small in his school robes, but the air felt different, like it belonged to another decade. Footsteps echoed. A boy walked toward him, tall, pale, handsome in a cold, composed way. His hair was dark and neatly kept, his eyes watchful and clever. He wore the Slytherin colors like he'd been born wrapped in them. Tom Riddle. But not the ink on the page. This was Tom-shaped memory, breathing and moving. Smiling as if he'd practiced it in a mirror. Harry, Tom said, voice smooth. You came. Harry's scar burned faintly, and behind his eyes the Merlin echo whispered a single, sharp warning. A memory cannot touch you unless you let it name you. Harry kept his voice steady. This is your memory. Tom's smile widened. Yes. And it's the truth. Harry's skin prickled. He remembered his term. No lies. He watched Tom carefully. The corridor behind Tom felt wrong. Too quiet, too staged, like a theater set waiting for the lead actor. Why show me this? Harry asked. Tom's eyes gleamed. Because you're being blamed for something you didn't do. That's true, Harry said, and felt the weight of it settle in his chest. Tom gestured. Come, I'll show you who really opened the chamber. Harry's scar went cold, and he realized the trick immediately. Tom wasn't offering information. He was offering direction. A path. A guided tour. A narrative. Harry took a step forward anyway. Because refusing blindly was as dangerous as trusting blindly. He needed data. But he didn't follow Tom like a student. He followed like a builder inspecting a structure. They walked past familiar corners that weren't quite right. Portraits whose faces Harry didn't recognize. Armor that looked less dented. The air smelled of polish and old parchment. Tom led him to a set of doors Harry knew, an old bathroom door. The entrance to a place damp and echoing. Tom's smile sharpened. Do you hear it? Harry's scar burned. And then, softly, sliding through the stone. Like a serpent through grass, Harry heard it. Air. Even in memory, the voice existed. That made Harry's stomach twist. Either the diary was recreating it perfectly, or the voice was real enough to leak into this constructed space. Tom watched Harry's face closely, hungry for a reaction. It speaks, Tom murmured. Only to certain people. Harry kept his expression blank. You mean Parseltongue? Tom's eyes brightened. Ah, so you do understand. You see, we're alike. Harry's scar flared in disgust. The Merlin echo whispered, cold as iron. Similarity is bait. Do not bite. Harry stepped closer to the bathroom door. Not touching it. Listening. The door wasn't a door here. It was a symbol the memory wanted to make important. Tom leaned in slightly, voice almost gentle. The chamber was opened 50 years ago, Harry. And I stopped it. Harry's scar burned sharply. He remembered his term. No lies. So if Tom said it, it must be a truth, or a truth wrapped around a lie so cleverly it still counted. Harry chose his words carefully. You stopped it, Harry repeated. Tom nodded, eyes shining. I caught the culprit. A foolish boy who didn't understand the beast he was controlling. I saved the school. Harry's mouth went dry. It could be true. A boy could be used as a scapegoat. A monster could be unleashed and then blamed on someone else. Harry had lived an entire childhood inside someone else's convenient story. He wasn't immune to that kind of trap. But the Merlin echo inside him was still studying the coin. Where is the cost? Where is the scar? Where is the consequence a true savior carries? Tom's story had no weight to it. No grief. No shadow. It was too clean. Harry asked, carefully, if you saved the school, why didn't you destroy the chamber? Tom's smile faltered by half a millimeter. Barely visible. But Harry saw it. Tom's voice stayed smooth. Because some secrets are buried for a reason. Harry's scar went cold. That line wasn't an answer. It was a philosophy. A justification. A permission slip for future control. Tom stepped closer. You're being watched, Harry. Accused. Feared. You could be expelled. But you don't have to face this alone. Harry felt the hook in his ribs. Tom's eyes glittered. Let me teach you. Let me guide you. The language you speak, it's not just a gift. It's authority. Authority. Control. A table. A sword. A destiny that made other people's choices for them. Harry's scar burned, and for a heartbeat he saw his reflection in the mirror of Arised again, older, calm, with people watching him like a leader. The temptation wasn't loud. It was quiet. It said, you wouldn't be hurt again if you were strong enough to set the rules. The Merlin echo whispered, fierce. This is the cliff edge. He wants you to step off and call it flight. Harry clenched his jaw. He had an oath. No killing to save himself. But he needed another rule too, one that kept him from becoming someone who solved fear with domination. He didn't speak it aloud yet. He just held it in his chest like a stone. Tom's smile returned, confident. Come, I can show you the entrance. I can show you how to open it safely. Harry's blood turned to ice. Open it, Harry repeated. Tom nodded, almost reverent. It's your inheritance, if you choose it. Harry felt the truth in that line, not because it was right. But because it was designed to sound inevitable. Inheritance. Heir. Permission. Contract. Tom leaned in, voice silky. Say it, Harry. Say the words. The castle will obey. Harry's scar screamed. The Merlin echo surged like a hand grabbing his collar. Do not speak. Root language is law. If you say it here, you teach your mouth the shape of the key. Harry stumbled back. The memory round him wavered as if his resistance had made the paper world shiver. Tom's eyes narrowed. What's wrong? Harry swallowed hard. You're not helping. Tom's smile sharpened into something cold. I am offering you power. Harry's voice came out raw. I don't want power that needs a monster. For the first time, Tom's composure cracked. Just for a heartbeat, Harry saw something behind his EY's. Something hungry and ancient and furious. Then Tom blinked, and the mask snapped back into place. Then you'll lose, Tom said softly. You'll be blamed. You'll be expelled. And the chamber will open anyway. Harry's scar flared. Because that was the real threat. Not the diary. Not the memory. The certainty that something was moving through Hogwarts right now, petrifying people, building fear like scaffolding. And the voice in the walls kept saying the same thing. You will open it. Harry backed away from Tom, breathing hard. I'm done, Harry said, voice shaking but firm. This conversation is over. Tom's eyes darkened. You can't just. Harry didn't argue. He did what he'd learned to do with wards. He wrote a rule into the space. Not with a wand. With intent. With same boundary building part of him that had stopped Vernon's fists and Quirrell's hands. No more, Harry said. The memory shuddered. The corridor dissolved like wet ink. And Harry fell backward into his own world. He slammed back into his dormitory bed as if he'd been dropped. His chest heaved. His scar burned. His palms were slick with sweat. The diary lay open on his knees, blank pages. Staring up like innocent paper pretending nothing had happened. Harry snapped it shut, breathing hard. The Merlin echo whispered, voice tight. It tried to make you speak. It wants your mouth to become its key. Harry swallowed and looked toward the dormitory window. The night sky beyond it was calm and indifferent. He felt sick. Because Tom Riddle had been careful with his lie less truth. He hadn't said, I opened the chamber. He'd said, I stopped it. That could be true in the ugliest possible way. A man could start a fire and then lead the bucket line. A man could release a monster. And then, save the school by blaming someone else. Harry pressed a shaking hand to his forehead. If Tom Riddle was connected to the chamber, then the chamber wasn't just a hidden room. It was a legacy dispute. A war of inheritance. And the diary wasn't a tool. It was a claimant. A thing trying to climb out of paper and into reality. Harry's jaw clenched. He wrapped the diary in his cloak. Shoved it into his trunk under folded clothes, then locked the trunk with a spell Hermione had taught him. Not because locks were perfect. But because locks were statements. He lay back, staring at the ceiling. And then he heard it, soft, sliding, intimate as breath against glass. Not from the diary. From the castle itself. Air. Harry sat up slowly, heart pounding. The whisper came again, closer. Open. Harry's scar burned. And for the first time, the root language in him responded automatically, not with words, but with understanding. The voice wasn't asking. It was issuing a command. And the command had a destination. Not Harry. Ginny. Harry didn't know how he knew. He just knew the way you knew a staircase had moved before you stepped and fell. A cold certainty dropped into his stomach. Harry threw on his robe and bolted out of the dormitory. Hermione and Ron found him near the staircase, breathless and wild-eyed. Harry. Hermione hissed. What are you doing? It's after curfew. Harry grabbed Hermione's sleeve. Where's Ginny? Ron blinked. Ginny. She's in the girls' dorm. She should be. Harry's scar burned like fire. He heard the whisper again, sharper now, threaded with triumph. Air is coming. Door will open. Hermione's face drained of color. Harry, what did you hear? Harry swallowed. The castle, he rasped. Or the thing in it. It's moving. And it's not talking to me. It's pulling someone. Ron's eyes widened slowly as understanding hit him like a punch. Ginny. Harry nodded, throat tight. Hermione's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady, because Hermione's fear always turned into action. We go to the Weasley dormitory. Now. They ran. Down stairs that shifted underfoot. Through corridors lit by sleepy torches. Past portraits that tried to scold them and got ignored. They reached the entrance to the Gryffindor Tower and shouted passwords until a drowsy prefect let them in with a furious hiss. They made it up the spiral staircase. They found the girls' dormitory door. And there, sitting on the steps outside it like she'd been waiting, was Ginny Weasley's older brother Percy, pale and shaking, holding a crumpled piece of parchment. She's gone, Percy whispered, voice breaking. Ginny's gone. Harry's blood went cold. Hermione snatched the parchment with trembling fingers. It was written in the same dark red as the message on the wall, the letters jagged like they'd been carved rather than written. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. Ron made a sound like a wounded animal. Harry stared at the words, scar burning, mouth tasting metal. The Merlin echo rose, hard and steady, like a sword being drawn slowly. Now the lock is being forced. Now the key must choose what it is. Harry clenched his jaw. He didn't want destiny. He didn't want a table. He didn't want power. But Ginny was a child, and someone was dragging her into an old war like she was a candle to light the way. Harry looked at Hermione and Ron. I'm going down, Harry said, voice shaking but absolute. Hermione swallowed hard. We're going down, she corrected. Ron's face was white, but his eyes were fierce. Yeah, he rasped. We are. Quote. Harry's scar pulsed once, cold and exact. And deep beneath Hogwarts, something answered back, like a door recognizing footsteps approaching at last. The ch meant in Percy's shaking hands didn't feel like paper. It felt like a verdict. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. Ron made a sound that was half growl, half sob. Hermione stared at the words as if she could force them to rearrange into something kinder. Harry felt his scar burn with a cold heat that made his teeth ache, not pain, not warning. A pull, like something deep under Hogwarts. RTS had finally stopped whispering and started reeling in the line. The Merlin echo rose, hard and steady. This is leverage. This is a clock. Harry swallowed, voice rough. Where did you find that? Percy's eyes were wide and glassy. In the common room. Just there. Like it wanted to be found. His voice cracked. They're saying she's dead. Hermione's expression sharpened instantly, fear turning into a blade. She's not dead, she said fiercely, like she could make it true by refusing anything else. If the monster meant to kill her, it would've. Harry's scar pulsed once. Not a murder. A ritual. A door requires a witness. Ron's fists clenched. So what do we do? Harry's mouth tasted like metal. He didn't want to answer with instinct. Instinct had almost made him a weapon last year. But the builder part of him was already assembling the structure in his head. Who left the message? How did it take Ginny? Where had the voice been loudest? Pipes. Damp corridors. That bathroom door that had whispered like steam from a crack. Harry exhaled slowly. Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, he said. Hermione went very still. The bathroom. Harry nodded. That's where the voice came from. And the message, it's the same pattern. It's announcing a door. Ron's face twisted. Brilliant. Of course it's the haunted bathroom. Percy blinked at them like they'd gone mad. You can't go looking for. Hermione cut him off. Tell Professor McGonagall. Now. Tell her Ginny is missing and we know where to start. Percy hesitated. McGonagall's in a meeting with the governors and Harry's scar flared, sharp. He heard footsteps in the stairwell, hurried and angry, adult footsteps. Then a familiar, too bright voice floated up like perfume. A terrible tragedy, yes. But luckily, there is one professor uniquely equipped. Lockhart. Hermione's face tightened with instant disgust. Oh, no. Ron's expression turned savage. If he says, uniquely equipped, I'm going to throw him off the stairs. Harry's scar pulsed. Time. Harry grabbed Hermione's sleeve and Ron's. We go. Now. Percy stared at them, horror and helplessness fighting in his eyes. You're children. Harry's voice came out low and certain. And Ginny is younger. Then they ran. The corridors felt wrong, too quiet, too watchful. Portraits whispered behind their backs. Armor creaked as they passed. Metal heads turning slightly like they were tracking them. As they approached the second-floor bathroom, Harry's scar burned harder, and the air grew damp in a way that didn't match the corridor. The castle's heartbeat deepened, heavier, like they were walking toward the center of a living thing. Hermione slowed, breathing fast. Harry, if we're right, if the entrance is there, then you have to be careful what you say. Ron swallowed. Because of the snake language. Harry nodded once. Because of law. The Merlin echo murmured, precise. Root language isn't sound. It is intent given grammar. A careless word becomes a clause. They pushed open the bathroom door. It was empty in the way abandoned places were empty, stale air, cracked sinks, puddles that never dried. Myrtle's sobbing drifted faintly from a far stall like the bathroom itself was crying. Harry stepped forward, scar burning hot. And then he heard it again. Not English. Not a memory. A wisp. R sliding through pipes like scales over stone. Open. Hermione's face went pale at Harry's expression. It's here, isn't it? Harry nodded, throat tight. It's here. Myrtle's head rose from a toilet bowl like a pale balloon. Eyes red-rimmed and offended. Oh, it's you, she sniffed, glaring at them. Breaking rules again. Myrtle, Hermione said quickly, voice urgent, a girl's been taken. Did you see anything? Myrtle brightened a little, misery always liked company. Taken, she repeated, savoring it. I saw a girl crying. She came in here with a book. She was trembling. Then she vanished. Harry's scar flared. A book, he said hoarsely. Myrtle nodded eagerly. She opened it and wrote in it and cried more and then. Myrtle drifted lower, voice dropping like she was sharing a delicious secret. Then I heard a man's voice. Not a teacher voice. A cold voice. Hermione's eyes widened. A man. Myrtle shrugged. Maybe. It sounded old. Like someone talking through water. Harry felt his blood turn cold. Tom. Ink. A door dressed as paper. Ron's voice shook. Did she go down a pipe? Myrtle pointed dramatically. Down there. Into the sink. I've always thought it was funny. Something's wrong with that sink. It's always been different. Harry stepped toward the sink Myrtle indicated. It looked like every other cracked porcelain basin except for one detail, a tin. Y symbol near the drain, etched so faintly it might have been a scratch. A snake. Harry's scar burned like a brand. The Merlin echo rose, steady and sharp. Here is the hinge. Here is the mouth of the lock. Hermione swallowed hard. That's it. Ron's knuckles were white on his wand. So, you just talk to it. Harry stared at the drain. He could feel the temptation to simply command it. To speak one word and make it obey. To take control and force the door open. That was the dangerous part. Not the monster. The ease. Harry closed his eyes. He thought of his oath, the spine it had given him. The line it had drawn inside him. Then he thought of something else, something Hermione had said with fierce clarity. Don't let them make you a weapon. Harry opened his eyes and spoke, quietly, with terms. Not open. Not a simple key. A contract. A boundary. In Parseltongue, root language shaped into restraint, Harry hissed. Open only a path. Close behind us. No invitation. No obedience beyond passage. The air shivered. The sink trembled, not from force but from recognition. Stone under the tiles responded like something old hearing an older grammar. With a grinding roar, the drain widened. Porcelain twisting away like skin peeling back to reveal a dark throat. A tunnel yawned open beneath the sink. Hermione exhaled sharply. Ron made a strangled noise that could have been a swear or a prayer. Harry's scar burned hard, cost biting down. Not pain enough to drop him. Just enough to remind him, every rule you write takes something. Hermione stepped closer, eyes bright with terror and determination. It worked. Harry swallowed. It listened. Ron stared into the tunnel. I hate listening plumbing. Myrtle hovered above them, thrilled. Ooh, she whispered, eyes shining. You're going to die. Hermione snapped. Myrtle. Myrtle pouted. I'm just being realistic. Harry didn't look away from the darkness. Ready? He asked. Hermione nodded once, jaw set. Ron's voice was thin but steady. If we die, I'm haunting Lockhart first. Harry almost smiled. Then they climbed into the sink and slid. The tunnel was slick stone and cold air, steep enough that gravity did all the work. Water dripped. The darkness smelled old, older than Hogwarts, older than the bathrooms, older than children and homework and school rules. Harry's scar pulsed in time with the deeper heartbeat below. The lock was close now. And the closer they got, the louder the old world in Harry's bones became. Faint flickers of candle wax and iron, circles drawn in salt, vows spoken under stone ceilings. Not full memories. Fragments. Like the past was pressing its face to the glass. They dropped hard into a stone passageway, landing in a shallow pool. Ron swore softly. Hermione's hair plastered to her face. Harry's knees ached. Then the whisper came again, closer now, thicker, triumphant. Air. Hermione shivered. It's in the pipes down here too. Harry didn't answer. Because he could feel the difference now. The voice wasn't just moving through the walls. It was moving toward them. Like it knew the key had arrived. They ran. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber where enormous pipes curved like ribs overhead. Water roared somewhere in the distance. The air was heavy and damp, pressing against their lungs. Then a fourth figure dropped into the passage behind them with a wet splash. Lockhart. He landed awkwardly, robes soaked, hair somehow still trying to look heroic. Ah, he panted, eyes wide with theatrical fear. Harry. Miss Granger. Weasley. Good you're here. I'm, leading the rescue effort. Ron's face twisted like he'd bitten something sour. You followed us. Lockhart's smile flickered. Followed. No, I, arrived strategically. Hermione's voice turned sharp. Where are the teachers? Lockhart cleared his throat. About that. There's been discussion. The governors, Dumbledore, was asked to step aside. Harry's stomach dropped. His scar burned with cold anger. A lock tested. A guardian removed. Ron's face went white. They sent Dumbledore away. Lockhart spread his hands as if this was all terribly unfortunate but ultimately manageable because he existed. Yes, but never fear. Hermione hissed, you're not here to help. Lockhart bristled. Excuse me. Harry's scar pulsed, warning. The Merlin echo whispered, he is a distraction, and distractions become weapons in the wrong hands. Lockhart's gaze flicked to Harry, then to the dark beyond the pipes, and something like cowardice sharpened into calculation. Now, Lockhart said lightly, as you've seen the entrance, I can take it from here. Ron stared. You can take, what? Lockhart's wand snapped up. Hermione inhaled sharply. Ari's boundary surged instinctively, but Lockhart wasn't trying to kill. He was trying to erase. Obliv. Ron's wand jerked up, too fast, too angry, too panicked, and a blast of magic shot out. It hit Lockhart's spell midair. There was a crack like glass shattering. Light exploded. Lockhart screamed. Ron's wand, still damaged from earlier chaos and patched with too much hope, backfired violently. Lockhart's eyes rolled back. He spun, smacked his head against a pipe, and collapsed into the puddle with a splash. Ron stared at his wand like it had personally betrayed him. Hermione's breath came in short bursts. Ron, are you? Ron swallowed. I meant to. He looked at Lockhart. Okay, I didn't mean to do that. But I'm not sorry. Harry's scar burned, but not in warning, more like grim relief. They couldn't afford a traitor behind them. Hermione grabbed Ron's sleeve. Leave him. Ron hesitated, then nodded, face tight with guilt he refused to name. They ran deeper. They reached a wall of stone carved with two enormous serpents, their bodies twisted into a knot at the center. A door. Not a Hogwarts door. Something older, something that didn't care about school rules or governors or teachers. The air here was thick with ancient intent. Harry's scar burned so hot it felt like a second eye opening. Hermione whispered, "This is it." Ron's voice shook. "That's the chamber." Harry stepped forward, not touching the carvings, listening. The door had a rule. Not just, open for Parseltongue. Something more precise, crueler. Open for the rightful voice. Open for the one who claims. Open for the heir who commands. Harry's throat tightened. He could speak the tongue. But the door didn't want language. It wanted identity. The Merlin echo stirred, calm and sharp. Then don't claim. Define. Be the builder, not the heir. Harry swallowed. He leaned close to the serpents, carved faces and hissed softly, not as a claimant, not as a master. As a negotiator writing a safe route through a trap. Open for rescue. Open for protection. Open for passage, not dominion. Close after, and hold. The stone trembled. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, like the door W. As deciding whether those terms were allowed. Harry's scar screamed with effort as the old magic resisted, testing him. Then the serpents' eyes flared with green light. Their bodies shifted. The knot uncoiled. Stone groaned and slid aside, revealing darkness beyond and a breath of air so cold it felt like a tomb exhaling. Hermione's eyes were wide. You did it. Harry's jaw clenched. It accepted the terms. Ron's face was pale. Of course it accepted the terms. You talk like you're signing contracts with plumbing. Harry didn't smile. Because the darkness beyond the door was loud W-I-T-H, the heartbeat he'd been feeling all year. And beneath that heartbeat was something else. A presence that made the back of his neck prickle. They stepped inside. The Chamber of Secrets wasn't a room. It was a cathedral built for a serpent's god. A vast stone hall stretched into darkness, columns carved with snakes, the ceiling lost above like the throat of a cave. Water pooled on the floor in black sheets. The air tasted like mold and old blood and forgotten promises. At the far end, towering above everything, was a statue. A man's face. Salazar Slytherin, carved enormous, mouth slightly open as if about to speak. Harry's scar burned like fire. Not because the statue was magical. Because the idea behind it was. A man who built a weapon and called it legacy. Hermione's voice came out as a whisper. Ginny. Harry saw her. She lay motionless on the wet stone, pale as paper, red hair spread like spilled ink. Beside her, the diary, open, and standing near it, like a boy stepped out of a memory. Tom Riddle. He looked solid here. Real. Too real. His eyes glittered when he saw Harry, like he'd been waiting for this moment the way hunger waited for food. You came, Tom said softly. Good. Hermione raised her wand instantly. Ron did too, though his wand trembled. Harry's wand stayed up, but his focus locked on Ginny. Her chest rose shallowly. Still alive. Barely. Tom's smile widened as if he'd tasted Harry's relief. She won't last, he murmured. But you could save her. Harry's scar flared. The Merlin echo whispered. Bait. Everything here is bait. Harry forced his voice steady. Let her go. Tom's eyes sparkled with amusement. Ah, he said. You don't even know what you are, do you? Harry's stomach tightened. Tom stepped closer, gaze liding over Harry like he was assessing a tool. I saw you in the ink, Tom said softly. I felt it when you touched my pages. His smile sharpened. You're not just a boy with a scar. Harry's scar burned hotter. Tom's voice dropped. Intimate and poisonous. You were an old lock pretending to be a child. Hermione's breath hitched. Ron's eyes widened. Harry's throat went dry. Tom tilted his head, almost curious. Do you know why I hate you, Harry? Harry didn't answer. Tom's gaze flicked to the statue. Slytherin built this place as a weapon, he said. But he wasn't the first man to dream of controlling magic with blood and oaths. Tom's smile turned colder. There was another. A builder. A jailer. A man who sealed what should have been his to rule. Harry's scar screamed. In High's mind flashed iron and candle wax and a door covered in bindings. The Merlin echo rose, suddenly sharp as pain. He knows the old door. He wants it. Tom's eyes glittered. They called him Merlin, Tom whispered. Hermione went rigid. Ron made a choking sound. Harry's entire body went cold. Tom watched Harry's face like a man watching a lock turn. And you, Tom said softly, are either him, or the last key he left behind. Harry's jaw clenched until it hurt. He forced words out. You're using Ginny. Tom smiled, almost fond. Of course I am. A door requires a hand. A monster requires a mouth. His gaze sharpened. But you. Tom's eyes brightened like a blade catching torchlight. You can do more than open my chamber, he whispered. You can open the other lock. The one under the castle. The one the old jailer sealed. Quote. Harry's scar burned like fire. The heartbeat beneath Hogwarts roared in his bones. Tom spread his hands as if offering a gift. Open it, he said gently. And I will give her back. Hermione's voice shook, fierce. Don't listen to him. Ron's wand shook, but his eyes were wild with hatred. He's lying. Harry's mind flashed back to the diary's agreement. I will not lie to you. A truth could still be a trap. Tom didn't have to lie if the truth was ugly enough. Harry swallowed. He looked at Ginny's pale face. Then he looked at Tom Riddle. And felt something settle in him, heavy. Steady, chosen. Not rage. Not desperation. A rule. Harry spoke, voice low and clear. I'm not opening anything for you, Harry said. Not this door. Not any door. Tom's smile faded. Then she dies. Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo whispered, hard as iron. He's forcing a false choice. Refuse the frame. Harry lifted his wand slightly. And then, without looking away from Tom, Harry spoke another oath, quiet but absolute. I swear, Harry said, voice shaking but firm, I will not become a master of monsters to save someone I love. The chamber answered, not with light, with pressure, like the air itself tightened around his words, recording them into the stone. Tom's eyes widened a fraction, startled. Because Harry hadn't just refused him. Harry had limited the kind of power Tom was trying to awaken in him. Harry's scar burned, cost biting down. Tom's expression twisted. You think an oath makes you safe? He hissed. Oaths make you predictable. Harry's voice stayed steady. Oaths make me mine. Tom's face went cold. Then he turned toward the statue, eyes glittering with hate and triumph. Very well, Tom said softly. If you won't open doors willingly, then I'll make you deal with what's already inside. Tom looked up at Slytherin's stone mouth and hissed in Parseltongue. A single word. A pure command. Not a request. Not terms. Authority without restraint. Kill. The statue's mouth opened wider. A deep, wet scraping echoed from within, like something enormous sliding across stone. Hermione gasped. Ron went pale. Harry's scar screamed. The Merlin echo rose like a storm, controlled only by the spines of his oaths. Here is the beast. Here is the test. Will you solve fear with domination, or with craft? The scraping grew louder. Water rippled across the floor as something moved beneath it. Tom's smile returned, sharp and satisfied. Look at it, Harry, he whispered. Look and die. Harry's heart hammered. He didn't look. Instead, he spoke quickly, without shouting, root language shaped into protection. Eyes down, Harry hissed at Hermione and Ron. Don't look. Mirrors only. Hermione's hands shook, but her mind snapped into motion. She yanked a small compact mirror from her pocket. She must have brought it for some practical reason Hermione would insist was not vanity. Ron fumbled for a broken shard of something in his bag, glass from the car crash, kept as a weird souvenir. Harry's scar burned, and Harry felt the old magic in his bones lunge toward the easiest solution, seize the basilisk with command. Override. Dominate. He clenched his jaw. No masters. No monsters. Craft. Boundary. Terms. The roar came, a sound like the earth itself protesting. And out of the statue's mouth slid the basilisk, thick as a tree trunk, scales glistening, eyes like lamps of death. It filled the chamber with its presence, and the air tasted suddenly of venom and ancient hunger. Harry's vision narrowed. He didn't let his eyes rise to the basilisk's face. He stared at the whetstone in front of its coils and raised his wand. Not to strike. To claim space. This ground is denied to killing, Harry whispered. Voice low and shaking, and the boundary snapped outward, an invisible dome of rule that didn't attack the creature, but tried to forbid the act. The basilisk lunged anyway. Because it wasn't just an animal. It was a weapon bound to a bloodline command. Harry's scar screamed as the boundary met the beast's will and shuddered. Tom laughed softly, delighted. Do you feel it? Tom whispered. It doesn't obey you. You're not the heir. Harry's teeth clenched. Maybe he wasn't. But Merlin wasn't a bloodline. Merlin was a builder. And builders didn't need obedience to survive. They needed angles. Harry glanced at Hermione's mirror, catching the basilisk's reflection in its shaking surface, just enough to see the coil, the jaw opening, the flash of killing eyes without looking directly. His scar burned, cost biting deep. The basilisk struck again. And Harry moved. The basilisk moved like a living landslide. Its coils shoved water across the floor in black waves. Its scales scraping stone with a sound that made Harry's teeth vibrate. The chamber felt too small for it, like Hogwarts had built a cathedral and then regretted what it had invited inside. Harry kept his eyes down. Not closed, that would be death too, just slower, but focused on the wet stone where reflection shimmered faintly. Hermione's compact mirror trembled in her hand, angled. Just enough for Harry to catch flashes of the monster's shape without meeting its gaze. Left. Hermione choked. Harry moved as the basilisk's head darted down like a spear, fangs snapping shut where his throat had been a heartbeat ago. Air screamed past his ear. The shockwave of its strike sent ripples through puddles and pain through Harry's scar like a hammer ringing a bell. Ron swore, voice wild. Harry. Harry didn't answer. He couldn't. He could feel the ancient command that sat inside the basilisk like a hook in its spine, Tom's word still vibrating in the air. Kill. And under Hat command was something worse, the old magic of this place agreeing that killing was its purpose. The easiest thing in the world would have been to fight authority with authority. To hiss one perfect syllable and take the basilisk. To turn it into a tool. Harry felt the temptation, hot, clean, seductive, because root language didn't need force. It needed certainty. And certainty was the most dangerous drug Harry had ever tasted. The Merlin echo rose, steady as a hand on his shoulder. If you seize it, you become what he claims you are. Do not win by becoming him. Harry's chest heaved. He planted his feet and did the only thing he trusted now. He built. He lifted his wand and spoke into the damp air, not a curse, not a blast, but a rule shaped around a truth Hermione had taught him in the library. Magic that lasted needed anchors. And boundaries needed definitions. Line of sight is denied, Harry whispered. The water vapor in the chamber thickened, not into fog that hid everything, but into a thin, shimmering veil that drifted between Harry and the basilisk like a curtain of breath. It wasn't a wall. It was a condition. A reminder to reality. Sight required clarity, and clarity could be interrupted. The cost hit immediately. Pain snapped behind Harry's eyes, sharp and clean. His vision speckled with white. Hermione cried out, Harry. I'm fine, Harry lied through his teeth. The basilisk hissed, confused for a heartbeat, its head swaying as if the world had stopped behaving properly. Then it lunged again, because confusion didn't matter to a weapon. Its body slammed a pillar. Stone cracked. The chamber shook. A slab of rock tore loose from above and crashed down between Ron and Hermione and Harry with a roar like thunder. Dust exploded into the air. Hermione screamed. Ron shouted something furious and helpless. When the dust cleared, Harry's stomach dropped. A jagged wall of collapsed stone now split the chamber. Hermione and Ron stood on the far side, close to Ginny's motionless body and the open diary. Harry was on the near side alone, between the basilisk and the only exit. Tom Riddle laughed softly from beyond the rubble, voice carrying like poison on water. Perfect, he murmured. Now you can die properly, Harry. Hermione's voice broke through, frantic. Harry, don't look at it, use the mirror. I know, Harry shouted. Ron's voice came raw. We're getting Ginny. Harry heard them splashing toward Ginny, heard Hermione's sob when she touched her and felt how cold she was. Harry didn't let himself turn his head. Because the basilisk had adjusted. It wasn't striking at his chest anymore. It was hunting for the angle that would force Harry's eyes up. It wanted a single moment of panic. A single reflexive glance. Harry swallowed hard. And for a heartbeat he remembered the cupboard, remembered Vernon's hand, remembered how panic had made him small. Not anymore. Harry tightened his grip on his wand. And that was when the chamber's air changed. Not with the basilisk. Not with Tom. With something else, a warmth that didn't belong in damp stone. A sound like wings cutting through silence. A rush of gold-red light spilled across the wet floor. A phoenix landed beside Harry like a falling star made gentle. Fox. Harry stared, eyes still down, seeing only the bird's reflection in a puddle, AFL. Aim-colored blur that made the chamber feel less like a tomb. Fox gave a single, sharp cry that pierced the basilisk's hiss like a bell through smoke. Harry's scar flared, recognition deeper than logic. Because Hogwarts had answered. Not Dumbledore's authority. Not a teacher's command. A bond. A promise older than school rules. When a child refuses to become a monster to defeat a monster, the castle finds a way to arm him anyway. Fox hopped forward and dropped something at Harry's feet with a heavy clang. A sword. Silver, broad-bladed, the hilt set with rubies that glinted even in the swampy torchlight. Harry's breath caught, not because he knew what it was by name, but because it felt like the opposite of Tom Riddle's magic. Not control, not theft, a weapon that answered need and refused greed. The Merlin echo whispered, almost reverent. An instrument of courage, not dominion. Take it. Harry grabbed the sword. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, pain behind his eyes steadied, like the blade was an anchor for his intent, giving shape to what his raw magic refused to do without cost. The basilisk lunged. Fox shot upward in a streak of Florida. Mian drove straight at the basilisk's face. The basilisk roared, and then screamed. Because the phoenix didn't fight like a wizard. It fought like fate with feathers. Fox clawed at the basilisk's eyes, a flurry of light and fury. The basilisk thrashed, blinded, enraged, its head smashing into stone, jaws snapping at air, gaze turned useless because it could no longer see. Harry didn't waste the moment. He moved with the sword raised, using the puddles for guidance, watching the basilisk's reflection tremble and twist, tracking the arc of its neck, the gape of its mouth. He didn't need to meet its eyes. He needed to hit the place where death lived. The basilisk struck blindly. Harry ducked, felt fangs graze his shoulder, felt hot breath wash over him like poison wind. Then he jumped, boots splashing water, and drove the sword downward with both hands. Steel met scale. For a heartbeat it didn't go in. Then the blade punched through with a sickening give, sinking deep into the roof of the basilisk's mouth. The basilisk convulsed. A roar ripped through the chamber so loud it felt like the pillars would collapse from the sound alone. Harry clung to the hilt, teeth clenched, arms screaming, and shoved until the blade sank deeper. The basilisk bucked violently, throwing Harry backward into the water with a crash. He landed hard, breath exploding from his lungs. The basilisk's coils spasmed. Then, slowly, its head crashed to the stone floor with a final wet thud. Silence fell like a curtain. Harry lay on his back, gasping, sword still in his hands. His scar burned. Not warning. Aftershock. Because he could feel what he'd just done. Not the kill. The choice. He'd used force. But he hadn't used domination. He hadn't become the heir Tom wanted. He fought like a builder, using the right tool, the right angle, the right limit. Harry pushed himself up. Then pain lanced through his arm. He looked down. A long gash ran across his forearm, fang scrape. Not a bite, but enough. Blackness began creeping at the edges of the wound like ink spreading in water. Venom. Harry's stomach dropped. His oath didn't stop poison. He swayed. Fox landed beside him, feathers glowing softly, and pressed its beak to the wound. Warmth poured in. The blackness halted, then receded. Harry's breath hitched. The pain eased into a dull ache. He exhaled shakily. Thanks, he whispered. Fox gave a quiet trill, as if the word, thanks, was unnecessary between promises. Across the rubble, Hermione's voice rang out, raw with relief and terror. Harry. The basilisk, did you? It's dead, Harry called back, voice hoarse. Ron let out a strangled sound that might have been laughter or crying. Then Hermione shouted, urgent again. The diary, Harry, it's doing something. Harry turned his head slightly, not to look at the monster, but to see the far side of the chamber. Tom Riddle stood beside Ginny now, his hand hovering above her like a puppeteer over a doll. Ginny's chest barely moved. Tom's face was bright with fury and panic, the mask slipping. No, Tom hissed, eyes fixed on the basilisk like he couldn't believe his weapon had failed. You weren't supposed to win. Harry rose to his feet, swaying slightly, sword heavy in his grip. Tom's gaze snapped to him, sharp, hateful, hungry. You had help, Tom spat, like help was a crime. Harry's scar burned. He felt the old truth in that statement and hated how Tom tried to make it shame. Yes, Harry thought. I had help. That's the point. Harry stepped closer to the rubble, blade lowered but ready. Let her go, he said. Tom's smile twisted. You can't make me. Harry's voice went steady. I'm not trying to make you. I'm ending you. Tom laughed, too loud, too thin. With what? A sword. You think you're some storybook hero. Harry's scar pulsed. The Merlin echo whispered. Stories are tools. He fears the story where he loses. Harry's gaze flicked to the basilisk's corpse. To its long fangs, glossy, dripping. A thought landed in Harry's mind with cold clarity. Some doors are destroyed by the key that once opened them. Harry moved. He crossed to the basilisk, ignoring the stink of it. And with a grimace he grabbed one fang near the base and wrenched. It came free with a wet crack. Venom dripped from the tip. Harry held it carefully, like a dagger made of consequence. Tom's smile faltered. What are you doing? Tom demanded, voice sharpening. Harry walked back to the rubble. Hermione and Ron stared, wide-eyed, as Harry held the fang up. Hermione's voice shook. Harry, that can destroy. I know, Harry said. Tom's eyes widened with sudden, real fear. No, Tom whispered. Harry didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He simply stepped as close as he could. Leaned over the rubble, and drove the fang straight down into the diary's center. The black cover bucked like a living thing. Ink exploded out, not words, not writing, but blood-dark memory. Tom screamed. Not a boy's scream. Something older and uglier, a sound of a soul tearing. The air around Tom rippled. His perfect face cracked like glass as the truth underneath tried to claw out. You don't understand. Tom shrieked, voice overlapping itself, becoming cruel and high and ancient. I can give you everything, power, control, answers. Harry's scar burned like a star. And suddenly, the chamber tilted in his mind and he saw it again, the round table, the sword, the older reflection warning him. Tom's offer was the same offer dressed in different clothes. Make the world obey so you never hurt again. Harry's hands trembled, not with fear, with the weight of refusing. He leaned forward and spoke, not in Parseltongue, not in root language. In plain English, like a boy refusing to become a myth. I don't want your everything, Harry said, voice shaking but clear. I want my friends alive. I want my choices to be mine. Tom's form shuddered. He lunged toward Harry like smoke trying to enter lungs. Harry's scar flared, and instinct rose, the ancient power inside him ready to slam a law into existence. Deny. Bind. Break. But Harry didn't bind Tom. He didn't dominate. He didn't become a jailer with a crown. He did something simpler. He held his oaths like a wall. He spoke one more rule, quiet, harsh, earned. I swear, Harry said, eyes on Ginny's still face. I will never trade a child's life for a monster's promise. The chamber seemed to tighten around the words, as if even stone approved the boundary. Tom's scream broke into silence. His body fractured, fading, unraveling into ash-like ink that drifted upward and vanished. The diary sagged around the basilisk fang, pages limp, dead paper at last. Ginny gasped. A sudden, violent inhale, like someone breaking the surface of deep water. Hermione sobbed and dropped to her knees, pressing her hands to Ginny's shoulders. Ron made a broken sound and crawled to her, face wet. Shaking so hard he looked like he might fall apart. Ginny's eyes fluttered open. Ron, she whispered, voice tiny. What happened? Ron laughed and cried at the same time. You, he couldn't finish. Hermione cupped Ginny's face gently. You're safe, she whispered fiercely. You're safe. Harry's throat tightened until it hurt. He didn't realize he'd been holding his breath until he finally let it out. Getting out should have been the hard part. It wasn't, because Fawkes, bright, stubborn, impossible, was still here. Harry looked at the rubble between them and his friends, and for a moment the old temptation flared again. He could command stone to move. He could rewrite gravity. He could force the world. Instead he lifted his wand and spoke with careful precision, shaping magic like carpentry. "Brace," Harry whispered. A faint lattice of light shimmered over the unstable rocks, temporary support, not destruction, not domination, just enough for Hermione to guide Ginny and Ron through a narrow gap without causing another collapse. Hermione stared at Harry, breathless. Harry, that was. Harry swallowed. Later, he rasped. "Get her through." They did. Ginny clung to Ron, weak and shaking. Hermione held her other side, whispering instructions like she could talk strength back into her bones. Once they were together again, Harry turned to Fawkes. "How do we?" he began. Fawkes didn't answer with words. It hopped forward, grabbed the back of Harry's robe with its beak, and tugged insistently, as if saying, "I didn't come here for you to debate logistics." Harry managed a breathless, shaky laugh. They gathered close. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and Fawkes spread its wings. Warmth washed over them. The chamber blurred. The stone vanished. And in an instant, they were back in the bathroom, tumbling out onto cracked tile in a heap of damp robes and shaking limbs. The sink returned to normal as if nothing had ever opened beneath it. For one heartbeat, the world was silent. Then the bathroom door flew open. Professors poured in, McGonagall first, face white with terror, Snape behind her, eyes sharp and furious, Madame Pomfrey shoving her way through like a warship made of anger. And then, Dumbledore. He stepped in last, calm in a way that made the adults unconsciously straighten. His eyes went straight to Ginny, alive, and something in his face loosened like a knot cut clean. But his gaze didn't stop there. It moved to Harry's scar. And for a moment, Harry felt it, Hogwarts itself leaning in. Listening, waiting to hear what name would be spoken now that the door had been opened and closed again. Dumbledore approached slowly. "Harry," he said softly. Harry's mouth was dry. "She's alive. I see that," Dumbledore murmured. And his voice held something almost like relief that sounded human, not headmaster. McGonagall's voice shook. "Albus, what? How?" Dumbledore lifted a hand gently. "Later," he said. His gaze remained on Harry. "Come," Dumbledore said quietly. "When Madame Pomfrey has ensured you are not currently leaking venom, I would like to speak with you." Harry's scar pulsed. Not warning. Expectation. Hermione clutched Ginny tighter. Ron looked like he didn't want to let go of his sister even to blink. Madame Pomfrey began shouting at everyone at once, which somehow worked. That night, after the hospital wing settled into tense quiet and Ginny finally slept, Dumbledore sat beside Harry's bed again. This time, there was no twinkle at all. Just truth waiting, like a door finally unlocked. "You did very well," Dumbledore said softly. Harry stared at the ceiling. "I almost didn't." Dumbledore's voice was gentle. "That is what makes, well, meaningful." Harry turned his head slightly. "You were sent away." Dumbledore's mouth tightened. "I was." Harry's scar warmed faintly. "And yet," Harry said quietly, "Fawkes came." Dumbledore's eyes softened. "Some bonds are not severed by governors." Harry swallowed. "Tom Riddle," he said. Dumbledore leaned forward a fraction. "Tell me." Harry's throat tightened. He hated how heavy it felt to speak it aloud, like naming it would make it more real. "He said Merlin sealed another lock under the castle," Harry whispered. "And he wanted me to open it." The room went very still. Even Madame Pomfrey's distant muttering seemed to fade. Dumbledore's eyes turned older than ever. "Yes," he said softly. Harry's stomach dropped. "So it's true." Dumbledore exhaled slowly. "There is a seal beneath Hogwarts," he admitted. "Older than the Founders. Older than most of our recorded history. It is, not merely a ward. It is an agreement written into stone." Harry's scar burned, recognition. The iron door in the mirror's vision flashed in his mind. Dumbledore's gaze held his. "And there is a reason," Dumbledore said quietly, "that your magic hears things others do not." Harry's hands clenched under the blanket. "Then stop telling me half-truths." Dumbledore's expression tightened, regret, and something like shame. "You were right," Dumbledore said. "You have earned terms. Harry's scar pulsed once. Dumbledore spoke the name carefully, as if it could either save or ruin him depending on how it landed. In very old stories, Dumbledore said, Merlin is called by another name. Harry's heartbeat thudded loud in his ears. Dumbledore's voice softened further. Emrys, he said. The name struck Harry like a bell heard through bone. Not a full memory, nothing that neat. But a shape, a resonance, as if something inside him had been waiting for that syllable to exist in the air again. Harry swallowed hard. So what am I? Dumbledore didn't answer with prophecy. He answered like a man who had learned to fear certainty. You are Harry Potter, Dumbledore said firmly. And you carry echoes of something ancient, whether by reincarnation, or by resonance, or by a bond I do not fully understand. Harry's scar warmed faintly. Dumbledore continued, voice steady. What matters is not what you are called. It is what you choose to build with what you have. Harry stared at him. Tom tried to make me an heir. Dumbledore nodded once. Tom always believed blood and claim were the same thing. Harry's voice was rough. And Merlin. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. Merlin believed in limits, he said quietly. In laws that protected even from those who meant well. Harry's chest tightened. Dumbledore looked at Harry's forehead, then at Harry's hands. I felt your oaths, Dumbledore admitted softly. The castle felt them too. Harry's stomach twisted. You were listening. Dumbledore didn't deny it. Yes, he said. And I am sorry. But I would be lying if I said I was not relieved. Harry frowned. Relieved about what? Dumbledore's voice dropped. That you choose restraint, he said. That you fear becoming a tyrant more than you fear losing. Harry's throat tightened. He thought of Ron's broken laugh. Hermione's fierce hands on Ginny's shoulders. The way power had tried to make him solitary, and the way friendship had made him human again. Harry exhaled slowly. So what happens now? Dumbledore's gaze turned distant for a heartbeat, as if he could see through floors into the roots of Hogwarts. Now, Dumbledore said quietly, we repair what has been strained. We strengthen the seal. Harry's scar burned faintly. And now, Dumbledore added, returning his gaze to Harry, I will stop treating you like a piece on my board. Harry's chest tightened. You promise? Dumbledore hesitated, then, very deliberately. He said, I swear to tell you the truth when it concerns your safety and your freedom. The words landed with weight. Harry felt it, the subtle click of an oath taking shape, not as a cage, but as a spine. Harry swallowed hard. Dumbledore rose. At the door, he paused. One more thing, Dumbledore said softly. Harry looked at him. Dumbledore's eyes held a strange, quiet warning. Tom Riddle's diary was not merely a memory, Dumbledore said. It was a fragment, an anchor for a soul. Harry's scar went cold. There may be other anchors, Dumbledore finished. Harry's stomach dropped. More doors. Dumbledore nodded, face grim. Yes, he said. And this time, we will not let you face them alone. He left. Harry lay back, staring at the ceiling. Exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with venom or bruises. Outside the hospital wing window, the night sky over Hogwarts looked calm. But deep beneath the castle, far under stone and wards and school rules, the older heartbeat still existed. Not louder, not quieter, just waiting. And somewhere in the quiet place behind Harry's scar, the name Dumbledore had spoken echoed once more, not as destiny but as a question. Emrys. Harry closed his eyes. Not to escape, to choose. Because if he was going to inherit anything from Merlin, it wouldn't be a crown. It would be the courage to build a world where locks existed for a reason, and where keys had the wisdom to refuse being used. End of Book 1. The first time Harry heard the word Emrys spoken outside Hogwarts, it sounded uglier. Inside the castle, the name had been a bell, old, resonant, heavy with meaning. Outside the castle, on Ministry lips, it became a label. A tag, a handle on a knife. Harry learned that in the most irritating way possible. By eavesdropping, which, Hermione would insist later, was not the same as spying if the adults were obviously planning something dangerous. Privet Drive, again. The summer was worse than the last. Not because Vernon and Petunia had become more cruel. Vernon's cruelty was consistent, like a clock that never needed winding, but because now they were afraid of Harry in a new way. Before, he was an embarrassment, a problem, a freak. Now, he was something else in their eyes. A risk. Harry heard them whisper late at night in the kitchen. He didn't need to press his ear to the door anymore. His boundary, his quiet rule against harm, made the house strangely sensitive to intent. Voices carried clearer when fear sharpened them. Vernon's voice, low and harsh, that headmaster sent an owl again. An owl. Like it's normal. Petunia's voice, brittle like glass, they're watching. I can feel it. And then Dudley, muffled but worried. Mum, is he going to? Petunia cut him off. Don't say it. Don't say what? Harry sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt the old temptation rise. Listen harder, pry deeper, know everything. He had learned what that cost. So he didn't. He only listened when the house itself pushed a sound into his boundary like a thrown stone. The knock came at midnight. Not at the front door. At Harry's bedroom window. 3 taps. A pause. Then 3 taps again, like whoever was outside wanted to be polite about breaking rules. Harry slid out of bed and pulled the curtain back. A tawny owl clung to the sill, eyes sharp and intelligent. Not the school owls. Not even Hedwig. Hedwig was off hunting somewhere in the dark. This owl wore a small brass tube on its leg with a seal stamped into it. A seal Harry didn't recognize. But the Merlin echo inside him did. His scar warmed faintly, not painful, just alert. Authority. Civic. Older than law, dressed as law. Harry opened the window, unfastened the tube, and pulled out the parchment. The handwriting was not Dumbledore's. It was sharper, cleaner, like someone wrote with the confidence of people who never doubted they'd be obeyed. Mr. Harry Potter, you are hereby informed that your presence at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry for the coming academic year constitutes a matter of national concern. Do not leave your residence without escort. Do not engage in experimental magic. Do not respond to provocations. A representative of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement will make contact within the week. L. Fawcett, Acting Undersecretary, Office of Special Compliance. Harry read it twice. Then a third time. Because special compliance wasn't a phrase that belonged in any decent world. His scar pulsed once, cold. Not fear. Anger. The Merlin echo whispered with grim clarity. They want the key in a box. And boxes always have locks. Harry crumpled the letter in his fist until the parchment creaked, then forced his fingers open and smoothed it again. No panic. No violence. Build first. He tucked it into his trunk under his school robe. Then he wrote one sentence on a clean sheet of parchment and tied it to Hedwig's leg when she returned an hour later, offended and damp from rain. Tell Dumbledore the ministry is moving. I want terms. Hedwig left with a snap of wings. Harry didn't sleep afterward, because the house was quiet. But the world outside it had started naming him like a problem. The leak in the leaky cauldron. Dumbledore didn't wait a week. On the 3rd day, Harry was moved, quietly, officially, for his safety. A witch from the ministry arrived at Privet Drive with a stiff smile and a file folder that looked too heavy. Vernon tried to argue until the air around Harry sharpened and vague. Ronan's rage suddenly felt like shouting into fog. Petunia didn't argue at all. She stood in the doorway as Harry left and didn't meet his eyes. But when Harry stepped outside, she spoke, barely audible. Merlin was never happy. Petunia whispered, like she was quoting something she'd heard once and never forgotten. Don't let them make you lonely. Harry froze. He turned. Petunia's face had already closed again, blank, distant. Safe. Vernon barked, get in the car. Harry got in. But the words stayed with him like a nail in wood. They put him in a room above the leaky cauldron. Not a prison. Not officially. Just a room with a lock that clicked too loudly and a window that didn't quite open all the way. Tom the barman was kind in the way old people were kind, practical, quiet, not interested in drama. Cornelius Fudge came on the 2nd night. He arrived with a smile too bright, eyes too watchful, and hands that kept smoothing his robes like he was trying to flatten his own nerves. Harry, my boy, Fudge boomed, stepping into the room as if he owned it. How are you? Settling in. Comfortable. Harry sat on the bed and didn't stand. The boundary around him tightened, not to attack, just to hold. Why am I here? Harry asked. Fudge's smile twitched. Safety, my boy, safety. After everything that's happened, well, there are concerns. Harry stared at him. Concerns about what? Fudge's gaze flicked to Harry's scar. Then away. Then back again. About you being targeted, Fudge said quickly. You know. Sirius Black. Harry's stomach dropped. Sirius Black. Fudge nodded too fast. Escaped Azkaban. Dangerous man. Very dangerous. And, well, some people think he might come after you. Harry knew the name. He'd heard it in whispers since first year, like a ghost story that wore a man's skin. Why would he come after me? Harry asked. Fudge's fingers tightened on his hat. Because, Fudge said, voice lowering, he betrayed your parents. Harry's scar warmed faintly at the word betrayed. Not because it agreed. Because it recognized story. And stories were often convenient. Fudge leaned forward, trying to look fatherly. So, Harry, we'll keep you safe. Quiet. No wandering. No trouble. Harry's eyes narrowed. Am I allowed to say no? Fudge laughed, like it was a joke, then realized Harry wasn't smiling and coughed awkwardly. Well, he said, it's not really a matter of. Harry cut him off. Terms. Fudge blinked. Pardon. Harry's voice stayed calm. If you want me quiet, you give me terms. If you want me safe, you tell me the truth. If you want me to trust you. Harry let the sentence hang like a blade. Fudge's smile had died completely now. He swallowed. Dumbledore has been very protective of you. I'm not asking about Dumbledore, Harry said. I'm asking about you. Fudge's eyes hardened for half a heartbeat. Then he forced softness back onto his face like a mask. All right, he said carefully. Terms. You may stay in Diagon Alley. You may go to shops with escort. You may not leave the alley. And you must be at Hogwarts as scheduled. Harry nodded once. And your people stop writing to me like I'm a national concern. Fudge blinked again. Well, that's an internal matter. Harry's scar pulsed once, cold. Harry's voice didn't rise. It's my life. Fudge's lips tightened. You are a symbol, Harry. Harry's chest went tight. He leaned forward, eyes level with Fudge's. I'm a person, Harry said quietly. If you forget that, you'll make enemies you didn't need. For a moment, the room felt like it held its breath. Fudge forced a laugh again, weaker this time. My word, you speak like an adult. Harry's scar warmed faintly. The Merlin echo whispered, dry. Adults speak like children with bigger weapons. Fudge stood abruptly. Well, good chat. Get some rest. Big year ahead. He left too quickly. Harry watched the door shut and listened to the silence afterward. Then, faintly, he heard voices below. Through the floorboards, in the leaky cauldron's common room. Not Tom. Not regular patrons. Two ministry witches speaking in quick, clipped tones. Can't keep him from Hogwarts, one said. Dumbledore won't allow it. And the Dementors, the other whispered. Harry's stomach dropped. The minister agreed. They're going to Hogwarts. Harry sat very still. Dementors. At Hogwarts didn't sound like protection. It sounded like panic wearing a uniform. His scar burned faintly. The Merlin echo stirred, uneasy. Creatures that feed on fear, invited to guard a school of children. That is not safety. That is control by terror. Harry exhaled slowly, then stood. He didn't smash things. He didn't shout. He grabbed his cloak and slipped out of the room. Because fastest way to lose your choices was to stay still while other people planned your cage. The first artifact. The next day in Diagon Alley, Harry moved like he was being watched. Because he was. Woors in plain clothes, happened to be near him no matter which shop he entered. A witch with a clipboard, happened to turn down the same aisle he did. Harry ignored them. He bought his books. He got new parchment. He took Hedwig treats. He pretended he was just a boy shopping for school. But the old part of him, the builder, kept counting exits. He drifted into an antique shop he didn't remember seeing before. Tucked between a robe shop and a place that sold cursed candle holders, for aesthetic ambience. The shop smelled like dust and metal and time. The sign read, Morgan's Relics and Rarities. Harry's scar warmed the moment he stepped inside. Not pain. Recognition. Like the air itself contained a familiar shape. A woman stood behind the counter, older, sharp-eyed, hair like storm clouds pinned up with silver. She looked at Harry once and didn't flinch. Potter, she said, like his name was a measurement. Or Emrys. Harry's stomach dropped. His wand hand twitched, but he didn't reach for it. He kept his voice calm. Who are you? The woman's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Someone who dislikes ministries, she said. And someone who dislikes boys being turned into legends. Harry's scar pulsed once, cautious. She reached beneath the counter and placed an object on the wood. A small piece of stone, smooth and pale, with faint markings like worn runes. It wasn't big, just the size of a palm. But the moment Harry saw it, his scar went hot. His vision flashed white. Candle wax. Iron. A circle carved into stone. A voice older than his bones. Remember the first oath. Harry staggered, catching himself on the counter. The woman didn't move to help. She simply watched, sharp and unsentimental. That, she said softly, is from a site in Cornwall. Older than the founders. The excavation team reported, her eyes narrowed, a resonance. The kind that wakes certain things. Harry swallowed hard. Why show me this? Because it's waking for you. She said simply. Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo whispered, tight. Artifact. Trigger. Anchor. Someone is gathering pieces. Harry forced himself to straighten. Who are you really? The woman leaned forward slightly, voice low. I'm the person your ministry won't admit exists, she murmured. Because if they say the word Merlin too loudly, the old families start counting their claims. Harry's jaw clenched. I'm not anyone's claim. Her eyes held his. Good, she said. Then you might survive. Harry stared at the stone. He could feel it humming, not like the philosopher's stone. Not like a Horcrux door of ink. This was different. This was Camelot-shaped. A relic of old agreements. A shard from a story that still had living clauses. Harry exhaled slowly and made a decision. He didn't touch it. Not yet. He asked the only question that mattered. What's coming? Harry whispered. The woman's face went hard. A fracture, she said. In the seal beneath Hogwarts. Small. But real. And something out there has noticed. Harry's scar burned. He thought of Tom's words. Other anchors. He thought of Dementors going to Hogwarts. He thought the ministry calling him national concern. A cold, steady anger settled in his chest. Not wild. Not violent. Controlled. Chosen. Then I need to know the truth, Harry said. The woman's gaze sharpened. From who? Harry's voice was quiet. From everyone. The train, the cold, the wrong hunger. Hogwarts Express Day came like a knife. Harry met Ron and Hermione on the platform, and for a few minutes the world stopped being a cage. Ron grabbed him in a fierce, awkward hug like he was checking if Harry was still real. Hermione looked like she wanted to hug him too but settled for BBing his sleeve and scolding him for not writing enough. Harry let it happen. He needed the normalness like oxygen. They boarded, found a compartment, and for a while it was laughter and sweets and stories about summer. Until the train slowed. Not from hills. Not from weather. It slowed like something ahead had reached out and put a hand on its throat. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. Harry's breath fogged in front of him. Hermione's voice went small. What is that? Ron swallowed. Dementors. Harry's scar burned, not with fear exactly, but with something, recognizing the cold as a kind of attention. The compartment door slid open. A tall cloaked figure stood there, face hidden, presence swallowing warmth. It wasn't just cold. It was hunger. And as it drifted in, Harry realized something that made his stomach twist. The Dementor wasn't sniffing for trauma. It was sniffing for old magic. For oaths. For the echo in Harry's bones that the ministry had started naming. The Dementor leaned closer. Harry's scar flared. The Merlin echo rose, steady, furious, controlled. It wants the hollow in you. It wants the ancient. It wants the key. Harry's heart pounded. He didn't collapse. He didn't faint. He held his breath and tightened his boundary like a fist. No, Harry whispered, not in Parseltongue, not in law language, just in refusal. The Dementor paused. It tilted its head, like it had found something unexpected. Then it leaned in again. And the air in the compartment cracked, literally cracked, as if the boundary around Harry had hit a limit and something inside him had pushed back. A thin line of pale light flared in the air between them, so faint it might have been imagination, except it made the Dementor recoil half an inch. Hermione gasped. Ron stared at Harry, eyes huge. The Dementor hissed softly, like wind through rot. And in that hiss, Harry heard meaning, not words, but intent. Emrys. Harry's blood turned to ice. Because it didn't sound like a name spoken by a person. It sounded like a creature tasting a scent. And liking it. The compartment door slammed open again, and a voice snapped like a whip. Stand back. A man stepped in, shabby robes. Tired eyes, wand raised. Professor Lupin. He didn't look at Harry like a legend. He looked at him like a boy about to drown. Lupin spoke of Patronus charm, and silver light flooded the corridor. The Dementor retreated. Warmth returned in shaky fragments. Harry's hands trembled. Not from cold. From the realization that something had just called him emerus with hunger. Lupin's gaze flicked to Harry, sharp and careful, then softened. "You all right?" Lupin asked quietly. Harry swallowed. "Yeah," he lied. Lupin didn't argue. He simply said, very softly. Like he was placing a warning on the table between them. Dementors are drawn to pain. But sometimes, they're drawn to power that looks like pain from the outside. Harry's scar burned. The Merlin echo whispered, grim. Year 3 begins. And the Watchers have changed. Harry looked out the window at the darkening sky and felt the old heartbeat under Hogwarts waiting, steady, patient, stressed. Like a seal with a hairline fracture. Like a lock that had heard the key growing up.